LoveLore Library. Chapter 44. On his way upstairs, Mag heard the egg rustling under the blanket again. He looked back, and a smile appeared on his face. He wondered if he was frightened by what Amy had said just now. After a good night's sleep, Meg was woken up by the alarm clock under his pillow at 5 o'clock the next morning. He turned it off as fast as he could, got out of bed quietly, changed his clothes, washed up, and went to the kitchen to make the braised meat. The braised meat needed to be braised for 2 hours, so he had to get up early. Although Meg's dough-kneading skills had improved, it still took him a long time to knead 2 large portions of soft dough. Meg had practiced countless times in the test field for the god of cookery until he could make a laggi ruggiamo that satisfied even him, who was the pickiest person in his previous life. He was very serious. The streaky pork that had been marinated for an entire night still needed some time, but this morning, apart from him and Amy, he was only going to make a few for Mabai and the others to try. Of course, when it was written on the menu and sold to the public, all the conditions had to be perfect. Maintaining the stability of the dishes was one of the basic requirements of a Michelin restaurant, and now it was also Meg's requirement for his own restaurant. Of course, he still had to collect money. Letting them taste the new dish in advance was one of the conditions of the crowdfunding. Meg, wearing an apron, had a serious expression on his face. He neatly picked up the large piece of streaky pork from the pot, and strictly followed the best steps and time he had summarized yesterday, as well as the amount of seasonings and spices used. After turning down the heat, he began to knead the dough to make the dough. Kneading dough was indeed a strenuous job. Fortunately, Meg had slowly figured out a method in the test field that could save a bit of effort and still make the dough well. However, he still kneaded the dough for an hour, even though he had to rest twice in between. When the dough was ready, Meg put it aside. He was not in a hurry to bake it. He glanced at his watch. It was already 7:05. The braised meat would cook for another 15 minutes, but Amy, who was usually up at this time, was not. He had to wash his hands, take off his apron, and go upstairs. Meg entered the room. Amy's eyes were closed, as if she was still asleep. However, her slightly trembling long eyelashes and the corners of her mouth that were about to burst into laughter showed that things were not that simple. It seems that the little fairy is still asleep. How can I wake her up? Meg stood by the bed, trying not to laugh, and looked a little distressed. Amy secretly opened her eyes, and took a look at Meg's eyes, then immediately closed her eyes. She turned her face slightly, and said, "The little fairy said she won't wake up until father's time." "Oh, Amy, S-I-C, single quote, S, Meg, can, Amy, comma, Meg's, Amy's. The little fairies, Amy suddenly opened her eyes, opened her arms, and wrapped them around Meg's neck. She giggled as she stood up. After standing up straight, she looked at him with joy and expectation, and asked, "Father, are the pancakes that are 100 times better than the pancakes ready?" "Almost, but they're the best when they're fresh out of the oven. Amy, change your clothes, wash up, and go downstairs. They should be ready soon." Meg smiled and nodded. He felt that he was full of happiness since the morning. He looked at the black dress beside him and said in his mind, "System, I want to buy a purple dress, the cuter kind. I'll pay in cash." This time, the system didn't even say anything. A page of hundreds of little dresses appeared in Meg's mind, from top to bottom, and the prices ranged from 1 to 500 gold coins. "I'll take the one that costs 10 gold coins." Meg looked at the dress that was inlaid with amethysts and priced at 500 gold coins. He really didn't like this style, so he bought a purple dress with a redbud flower embroidered on the chest and a layer of tulle on the outside. "Okay, Amy will change right away." Amy's eyes lit up, and she nodded repeatedly. I've prepared new clothes for Amy. See if you like them. After the system confirmed that the clothes were in place, Meg walked to the wardrobe with a smile and looked back at Amy. Really? Amy's little face was full of expectation. Meg opened the wardrobe and took out the little dress that was hanging inside. He walked to the bedside, held it in front of him, and said with a smile, "Do you like it? It's so beautiful, and it's purple. Amy likes it very much." Amy looked at the little dress, and her eyes were full of surprise. She jumped on the bed happily and tiptoed to kiss Meg's face. She nodded and said, "Father, Amy loves you. I love Amy too. Come, let's try on the new clothes." Meg was also very happy, and he helped Amy change into the new clothes. There were some beautiful patterns on the upper body, and the redbud flower embroidered on the chest was very eye-catching. There was also a layer of purple tulle on the hem of the pleated dress. Amy turned around on the bed and looked down at the purple tulle floating in the air. Her face was full of surprise, and she played with it for a while before stopping. Meg looked at Amy, who looked as cute as a little angel after changing into the little dress. He smiled and reached out to pat Amy's head. "Let's go. Put on your shoes and go wash up. Father will make you some pancakes downstairs." "Okay." Amy nodded obediently. She went down the stairs, put on her white shoes, and went to wash up. Meg sneaked a glance at Amy, who was squeezing toothpaste for herself. It seemed that she wouldn't have to worry about washing up in the future. Only then did he go downstairs. Meg turned off the fire for the braised meat that was just right on time, and placed the uncooked dough on the preheated oven. He thought for a while, and placed 16 of them at intervals, which would fill up the entire oven. After a while, Amy came downstairs after washing up. She stood at the kitchen door and looked inside. She had already smelled the rich and tempting aroma of the braised meat. She sniffed hard and said curiously, "It smells so good. Father, what is this? It tastes completely different from the rainbow fried rice." "Amy, take a seat first. You'll know in a while," Meg said with a smile, keeping her in suspense. "Okay. I'll go check on Ugly Duckling first." Amy nodded. She turned around and walked behind the counter, squatted down, and listened for a while. Then she patted the little blanket gently. "Ugly Duckling, get up now. Come out obediently today, or I'll roast you and eat you right now." Rustle, rustle. The quiet big egg suddenly made a sound, sounding a little anxious. "Yes, that's right. Keep up the good work." Amy nodded and encouraged it. The rustling sound became more urgent, as if it were afraid that it would be roasted and eaten if it didn't act more actively. In the kitchen, Meg shook his head with a smile. Although he thought his daughter was very cute, the little guy in the big egg was a little pitiful. He slid the thin knife in his hand across the edge of the biji bread, picked up a piece of braised meat from the pot, put it on the chopping board, and stuffed it all into the rugiamo. Then he poured a small spoonful of lajit sauce over the meat, and an authentic lajit rugiamo was ready. Chapter 45. Coming. Amy immediately got up and climbed onto a chair. She stared at the steaming rugiamo in Meg's hand. There seemed to be something in the white flatbread. The alluring aroma made her swallow her saliva and stare at it greedily. Meg put the plate in front of her and handed the rugiamo to her with the top facing up. "Be careful, it's hot," he said with a smile. "Eat with this side facing up. There's a little bit of gravy in it." "Okay." Amy nodded and grabbed the edges of the rugiamo with her two little hands. Her attention was completely drawn to the white flatbread with cute little circles on it. Her eyes lit up. "It's so beautiful." The flatbread was filled with braised meat, and the aroma was the same as the braised meat. Amy was already hungry, and after smelling the aroma, she became even hungrier. She held the Ruggiamo with both hands and took a bite. Crunch! Amy's eyes lit up as she took a bite of the 2 layers of crispy by G bread and the delicious braised meat. The white flatbread was so soft that it didn't take much effort to bite into it. It tasted sweet and delicious, unlike the pancakes, which made her teeth ache after a while. The taste was also far inferior. And the most delicious part was the meat wrapped inside. With one bite, delicious gravy gushed out from the soft meat, making the sweet biscuit even more delicious. It was simply too delicious. Does it taste good? Meg asked expectantly at the side. Yes, it's so good. It's 100 times better than the pancakes. No, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times better. Amy looked at Meg and nodded vigorously. She took another big bite of the Ruggiamo and chewed happily with a happy smile on her face. That's good. There's more if you like. Meg nodded and smiled. Looking at Amy, who was holding the Ruggiamo like a little squirrel and chewing the crispy Ruggiamo with a happy smile on her face, Meg felt a sense of accomplishment. He felt that working tirelessly for 3 months in the training field, getting up in the middle of the night to marinate pork, and getting up at 5 in the morning to make Ruggiamo, was all worth it. Because he wanted to protect this smiling face forever. Watching Amy eat more than half of the Ruggiamo, Meg went into the kitchen and took out a freshly baked biji bun to make a Ruggiamo. He took a bite. The soft and sweet biji bun was filled with juicy streaky pork. Although the meat was fat, it didn't feel greasy at all. The delicious gravy was paired with the sweet biji bread, which constantly attacked the taste buds. This feeling of having a mouth full of meat was really too satisfying. After swallowing, the taste of the braised meat still lingered in the mouth. Delicious. No wonder it's made according to my requirements. This is the real Lagi Ruggiamo. Meg's eyes lit up, and he took another big bite. He was used to eating all kinds of ingredients cut by the delicate knife skills of the Yangzhou fried rice. Eating something equally delicious could also relieve his tiredness of taste. Father, I want to eat one more. After finishing the Ruggiamo, Amy opened her little hands and looked at Meg. Her little face was full of excitement and expectation. Okay, I'll make another one for you. Meg nodded with a smile. He put aside the half of the Ruggiamo in his hand. As he made another Ruggiamo for Amy, he asked in his mind, System, how much do the ingredients for a Ruggiamo cost? Also, can you provide me with some small brown paper bags? That way, customers can carry them easily. If they're in a hurry, they can eat while walking. It would be best if the name of the restaurant could be written on them. For the logo, use Amy's photo. Just her back will be fine. By the way, it's paid. Don't be nervous. The streaky pork is made from the pork ribs of the shadow boar, which are unique to the forest troll's territory. The system began to talk about the origins of the ingredients. It was so detailed that it even wanted to explain to Meg where the salt came from. I don't want to listen to you. I know these ingredients are extraordinary. You just want to sell them at a higher price. Just tell me how much they cost. Meg interrupted the system. The restaurant was going to open soon. He didn't have time to listen to the system dawdling. An ellipsis appeared in the system's mind. After a moment of silence, it said, the cost of ingredients for a Ruggiamo is 80 copper coins. If the host needs a large number of custom-made bags, 10 copper coins for a high-end custom-made bag. Who sells Ruggiamo bags for 10 yuan? No, 5 copper coins. Take it or leave it. Meg curled his lips. The ingredients were worth the price, or rather, it was worth it. But he wouldn't sell a bag for 10 copper coins. How about 8 copper coins? The system asked tentatively. 4, Meg answered calmly. Okay, 5. Deal. The system answered decisively this time. The bags are being custom-made. They can be delivered in 5 minutes. Okay. Meg raised his eyebrows. He was good at bargaining. He calculated in his mind. The ingredients were 85 copper coins, so 300 copper coins for a Ruggiamo. It was more convenient than Yangzhou fried rice. As for rounding the price, of course, it was to make it easier for Amy to earn money. One Ruggiamo could make 215 copper coins, and 16 Ruggiamos in one batch would make 3,440 copper coins. The 2 balls of dough could make at least 64 Ruggiamos. Even if he only sold 64 Ruggiamos in one morning, he could still make a net profit of 13,760 copper coins, which was much faster than Yangzhou fried rice. Meg handed the Ruggiamo in his hand to Amy, who was anxiously waiting for him. Then he went into the kitchen and adjusted the temperature of the Ruggiamo in the oven. It was almost 7:30, and the restaurant was about to open, so he didn't have to worry about wasting the Ruggiamo. Now he just had to wait for the system to finish making the bags and make sure they were up to standard. Outside the restaurant, Luna, who was wearing a light gray linen dress, was looking at the restaurant in confusion. She was wearing a white silk scarf with a lily embroidered on it with gold thread. Her straight black hair was draped over her shoulders, making her delicate face look quite intellectual. Could it be that I remembered wrongly? Shouldn't Amy's house be here? Luna looked around, puzzled. This was the last house in Aden Square, and she still remembered the sign of the blacksmith's shop next to it. However, in her memory, this place used to be a crumbling 2-story wooden cabin. It had only been 6 or 7 days since she had last sent Amy back, but now, it had transformed into such a lavish and beautiful restaurant. That entire wall of transparent crystal, the neatly arranged tables and chairs, and the crystal chandelier in the restaurant. When had such a top-notch restaurant appeared in Chaos City? Chapter 46. Beep. The first batch of bags has been completed and have been delivered. The fee will be deducted automatically every time the host uses them, the system said. Meg looked at an iron box that was 15 centimeters long and 20 centimeters high beside the oven. Inside the box was a stack of brown craft paper bags. He reached out and picked one up. It felt gritty, and in the center of the front were the words Lagi Ruggiamo. He turned it over. On the back were the words Amy in golden curvature. Below it was the back of a little girl drawn with simple black lines. Although there wasn't much ink, the cute little girl in a skirt with one short leg raised was still vivid on the paper. She also had a pair of cute little pointy ears. It was Amy's back at a glance. System, your pair of small ears are very lively. Meg nodded with satisfaction. He turned around and looked at Amy, who was happily eating her Ruggiamo at the table. He wanted to tell Amy that her pointy ears would not bring her mockery, but envy and love. Everything would start from the back of the cute little girl drawn on the bag. He would use the love of the foodies in this world to fight against the deformed prejudice and shine a light on the half-elves who had done nothing wrong. He believed that sooner or later, the back of this little half-elf girl would be remembered by many people. However, Meg suddenly felt a burning sensation in his body. It was different from the feeling of the Yangzhou fried rice turning into a warm current that relaxed his muscles. Instead, he felt as if someone had thrown a chili pepper into his blood. His blood seemed to be boiling. System, you didn't put drugs in the food to get back at me, did you? Meg couldn't help but feel suspicious when he felt the burning sensation. It reminded him of something indescribable. Host, please don't slander the system. The ingredients produced by the system are all top grade. They are non-toxic and non-harmful. It is impossible to add indescribable things to the ingredients, the system replied seriously. Then what's happening to me? Whose blood is boiling after eating Rigiamo? Meg still didn't believe it. Although the heat wasn't uncomfortable, and he felt a little comfortable after getting used to the accelerated blood flow, this situation still made him feel a little uneasy. The host interrupted the introduction of the ingredients earlier, so you don't understand the characteristics of the ingredients. The system won't take the blame for this, the system replied. Meg raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect the system to shift the blame. He thought for a while and said, "There's pork in the Yangzhou fried rice, no problem. Is there anything special about the flour?" System, don't tell me you're planting the wheat in some strange place. This wheat is produced in the territory of the Demon Clan, in the Berserk Fog Island in the depths of the Undead Islands, in an area where there are no demons. The system has specially opened up a farm. During the day, the Berserk Fog is dispelled, and the sunlight is up to 12 hours. At night, it fully absorbs the Berserk factor. After eating it, it will have a certain activation effect on the bloodline. It can improve blood circulation for ordinary humans. The more violent the race, the stronger the effect, but there will be no adverse effects. The system replied. That's good. Meg nodded, but on second thought, he felt a little ashamed to sell Rigiamos with such an effect. What if a girl asked him if he had drugged her after eating it? How could he explain that? "Father, I feel a little hot again." Amy's voice came from outside. Meg hurried out of the door. But since the system had promised that the Rigiamo would be good for the body and wouldn't have any adverse effects, he wasn't too worried. Looking at Amy, whose face was slightly red after eating 2 Rigiamos, he thought for a while and said, "Amy, try to cast a fireball magic." When she felt uncomfortable after eating the Yangzhou fried rice, Amy had used a fireball magic to relieve the discomfort. He just didn't know what effect the Berserk factor would have. Okay. Amy nodded obediently. She stretched out her hand and slowly opened it. A ball of bluish-purple flame appeared in her hand with a bang. It abruptly rose more than a meter into the air and pulsed violently. It looked very unstable. Meg subconsciously took 2 steps back and looked at the berserk flame in Amy's hand. The flame was bigger and darker than before, leaning toward purple. After Amy released the flame, the redness on her face gradually faded. The temperature in the room rose rapidly because of the flame. It was more terrifying than the flame she had released before. Close. Amy looked at the flames in her hand, which didn't seem to be easy to control. She slowly clenched her hand, and the flames were slowly squeezed together as if they were being caught by an invisible hand. They became a deep bluish-purple fireball in her little palm. This is probably what a genius is like. Meg thought proudly as he watched Amy play with the fireball in her hand for a while and then extinguish it. Moreover, this berserk factor seemed to be able to increase the power of Amy's fireball, but he still needed to find a chance to verify it. After confirming that Amy had released the fireball and had no other adverse effects, Meg helped her tie her hair into a double ponytail again. She liked this hairstyle, and it would probably take some time before she changed it. After putting the hairbrush in the counter, Meg looked at the time and saw that it was 7:30. He could start business now, so he walked to the door. Meg unlocked the door and pulled it inwards. A girl was standing outside the door. He couldn't help but be stunned. The girl looked to be about 20 years old. She was of medium height and a little thin. She was wearing a light gray cotton dress with a silk scarf embroidered with a golden lily on her shoulder. Her straight black hair was neatly combed. Her face was delicate and pretty, and her black eyes were particularly bright. She looked a little artistic and intellectual. The girl looked like she was about to knock on the door when the door suddenly opened. Her hand froze in midair. She looked at Meg and withdrew her hand a little embarrassedly. However, she still asked graciously, "Hello, is this Amy's house?" Luna was also a little surprised to see Meg come out of the door. "Who is this clean-looking man? Why is he here? He took over Amy's house and opened this restaurant. Could it be?" A bad thought flashed through her mind. Although the Grey Temple was in charge of maintaining order in Chaos City, there were still many things that happened quietly in the dark. Even the Grey Temple couldn't guard against them. "Teacher Luna, why are you here?" Before Meg could say anything, Amy had already run over and squeezed under his arm. She looked at Luna with a pair of eyes full of surprise. She tugged at Meg's apron and said proudly, "This is my father. He cooks very well. Aren't you surprised that I'm updating so early? Well, my dear friends are too awesome today. We've successfully made it to the top of the rankings. Now that we're in 4th place, it wouldn't be right if I didn't update to express my gratitude. Therefore, I resolutely gave up on the other updates and wrote a chapter to show my respect. Then, since we're already in 4th place, why don't we try to make it to the top 3? I've taken a look, and it's only 4,000 recommendation votes away. My dear friends, if each of you has 1 recommendation vote, we should be able to make it to the top. Well, this time, I posted my thoughts here. In fact, I wanted to sincerely invite friends who read the book, Daddy's Security Restaurant, outside of the Chidian Chinese Literature Network, to come to the Chidian Chinese Literature Network to bookmark Qingyu and give her a recommendation ticket so that Daddy's Security Restaurant could climb a little higher. Chidian is the first website and also the official website, so Qingyu can only see the reviews here and interact with the readers here. If you think this is a book worth supporting, I hope you can come to Chidian and support it to make it to the top of the rankings. This is an extra chapter, so there will be a regular chapter later, and it will be sent to you at the 3rd update. Chapter 47. Upon hearing Amy's voice, Luna's heart was immediately put at ease. When her gaze fell on Amy, she couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. Today, Amy was wearing a beautiful little purple dress. The golden red embroidered flower on the chest was very delicate, and her hair was tied into 2 cute little braids on both sides. She looked very skillful at it, and her clean little face was full of joy. The little girl who used to wear old linen clothes and her hair was always disheveled, often squatting in a corner by herself in a daze, making people feel sorry for her, had suddenly become a delicate and cute little princess. While Luna was surprised, she also felt a little gratified. After hearing Amy's introduction to the man next to her, Luna was even more surprised. In her impression, Amy's father was seriously ill. She had seen the father and daughter once from afar. He was wearing a tattered cotton coat full of stains, and he was walking with a hunched back. Half of his face was covered by a beard, and he looked like an old man past his prime. Although she didn't know what kind of earth-shattering changes had happened to this man in just a few days, Luna still nodded politely at Meg, and said with a smile, "Hello, I'm Luna Field. I used to teach Amy mathematics, but I haven't seen her come to school these days, so I came to see her before class today." "Hello, Miss Luna. I'm Meg, Amy's father. Thank you very much for taking care of Amy all this time." Meg also nodded with a smile. He could feel a hint of wariness and distance from this smiling girl, and it just so happened that he liked this kind of distance. Teacher Luna, who was often mentioned by Amy, was the person who treated Amy the best in Chaos City. In addition to teaching Amy mathematics, letting her go to class, and combing her hair, she often brought things for Amy to eat. The sensible Amy would bring them back and share them with her father. It could be said that she had given Amy a warm hug when his predecessor was at his lowest, protecting her last bit of innocence. Meg would always remember this kindness in his heart. Although his predecessor did not have direct contact with Luna, he would secretly investigate the people who had contact with Amy. It was not very detailed, but it was enough to eliminate the possibility that they were dangerous. Luna should be from a noble family in the Roth Empire. She came to Chaos City for some reason, and became a math teacher at Chaos School under the Grey Temple. You're too kind. I'm relieved to see that Amy is fine. Luna smiled and stroked Amy's hair. When she looked at Amy, her wariness completely disappeared. The smile on her face was sincere and gentle, and it seemed to radiate a motherly glow. Teacher Luna, Amy is very good. Father conjured a beautiful house out of thin air, and made super delicious rainbow fried rice and rigiamo for Amy, Amy said with a smile. She reached out her little hand and held Luna's finger. She turned to Meg and begged, Father, can you make a plate of rainbow fried rice for Teacher Luna? Of course. Meg nodded with a smile. He looked at Luna and said, Miss Luna, if you haven't had breakfast yet, maybe you can come in and have a seat. Well. Luna was a little hesitant. She had not had breakfast yet, but she came to see Amy in the morning. It would take more than 20 minutes to get back to Chaos School from here. If she had breakfast here, she might be late for class. Teacher Luna, eat it. Father's rainbow fried rice is super delicious, Amy said coquettishly as she shook Luna's finger gently. Luna looked at Amy's expectant little face, and her desire to give her the best things. Her heart softened, and she nodded with a smile. Okay, then I'll eat the rainbow fried rice that Amy recommended. Please come in. Meg pressed the door with one hand and stepped aside to let them in. Thank you. Luna nodded politely. She took Amy's little hand and walked into the restaurant. She had a good impression of Meg for holding the door for her, and the smile on his face was kind and distant, which made her feel very comfortable. It seemed that she had not met such a gentle person in a long time since she came to Chaos City. Meg reached out and turned the sign on the door. He glanced at the weapons shop next door, and was a little surprised that Mabai was not here for breakfast today. He turned and went back to the restaurant. Luna took Amy's little hand and looked around the restaurant. The brown and gray style was very comfortable, and the murals on the wall were a little surprised by Meg's taste and knowledge. The brown wooden tables and chairs were placed separately, and it was not crowded at all. The beautiful crystal chandelier and the bright restaurant made people feel luxurious and comfortable. She had never been to a restaurant like this before. Even in the capital, she could not find such a comfortable restaurant. After sitting down at a table by the window, Luna looked up at Meg and said, Then I'll order the rainbow fried rice that Amy recommended. Thank you. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg smiled and nodded. He glanced at Amy, who was sitting across from Luna, and walked toward the kitchen with a smile. Teacher Luna, it's really super delicious, Amy said, looking at Luna with her chin in her hands. Her little face was full of seriousness. Yes, I believe in Amy. Luna smiled and nodded. Looking at the menu beside her hand, she picked it up curiously. The soft leather felt comfortable to the touch, and when she opened it, she was stunned. There was only one dish on the huge menu. Yangzhou fried rice. Luna softly repeated. This should be the rainbow fried rice that Amy mentioned. But what is Yangzhou? Some kind of ingredient? Or some place? After seeing the price, Luna frowned. 600 copper coins per serving. Although she did not know what the so-called Yangzhou fried rice or rainbow fried rice was, the price was a little high. It was enough for an ordinary family to eat for several days. She was now a teacher at Chaos School, but she only received 30 gold coins a month. Although her family would send her a few hundred gold coins every month, she usually didn't spend that money on herself. There were many children in Chaos City who didn't have enough to eat. As such, spending 600 copper coins on a meal was indeed quite extravagant for her. However, she looked at Amy, who was sitting opposite her with an expectant expression, and Mag, who was cooking seriously in the kitchen, and she closed the menu with a smile. The restaurant should have just opened. There was only one dish on the menu, and it was so expensive. Maybe she was the first customer. Then, I'll eat it and give this father and daughter a boost in their new life, Luna thought to herself. Of course, she could only do such a luxury once in a while. Chapter 48. Luna, who had come to support Meg and Amy, saw the Yangzhou fried rice on the table, and her eyes lit up. So beautiful. This was the first thought that flashed through her mind. Then, she became curious again. What kind of knife skills are used to cut all the ingredients into the size of rice grains? And judging from the cooking method, could it be that all the ingredients were mixed together and cooked together? But how are the eggs wrapped around the rice? The aroma of the eggs mixed with the aroma of all the ingredients assailed her nostrils, and she couldn't help but secretly swallow her saliva. Miss Luna, try it, Amy said softly, looking at Luna expectantly. Meg stood to the side with his hands clasped behind his back. He also looked at Luna, hoping that this Yangzhou fried rice would give her a good experience. Then I'll start eating, Luna said with a smile. She gracefully picked up the spoon and scooped half a spoonful of fried rice into her mouth. Soon, she was immersed in this special taste. There was no mushy texture like when boiled. She didn't know what cooking method was used to make each ingredient maintain its own characteristics. Crisp, tender, and refreshing. The flavors of all the ingredients were so distinct, but they were perfectly blended together. It was a taste she had never experienced before. She never thought that food could be so delicious. It was as if the door to another world had been opened. After swallowing the fragrant fried rice, it turned into a warm current that nourished every muscle in his body. It was as if all the pores on his body had opened up. That kind of clear and comfortable feeling was intoxicating. It's so delicious. Looking at the fried rice in front of her, Luna only had this thought left in her mind. Even when she was in the capital, she had never eaten anything as delicious as this. She felt satisfied with just one bite. She couldn't help but take another spoonful and put it into her mouth. She carefully tasted the tree mushrooms and bamboo shoots from the forest, the prawns from the sea, the tender eggs, and the fragrant rice in her mouth. She only felt that it was more and more delicious. Her rationality and the noble etiquette that was deeply ingrained in her bones told her that she should be elegant in front of others. However, in front of such delicious food, her hands seemed to be out of her control. Spoonful after spoonful of delicious fried rice, the spoon made a crisp sound when it touched the plate. Her previous thoughts of supporting Meg had completely disappeared. On the contrary, Luna felt that her thoughts were somewhat funny. How could no one eat such delicious rainbow fried rice? As for the price of 600 copper coins per serving, it was still extravagant for her. However, for this restaurant, with such delicious food, this price was worth it. Furthermore, he was alone in Chaos City, so there was nothing wrong with being extravagant once in a while. A delicacy like this was probably the best consolation in a foreign land. Meg looked at Luna, who was immersed in the fried rice, and a sincere smile appeared on his face. It was probably the dream of every chef to see a customer eat the food he made and smile happily. Amy also had a happy smile on her face, as if she had done something amazing. Ding! The spoon made a soft sound when it touched the plate. Luna looked at the empty plate in front of her and realized that she had finished the whole plate of Yangzhou fried rice. The plate was so clean that she could even see her own reflection. She was surprised and a little embarrassed. She didn't expect that she would eat the plate so clean. Moreover, what surprised her even more was that after eating a plate of fried rice, she felt as if she had taken a comfortable hot bath. Amy looked at Luna, who took out a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped the corners of her mouth, and asked, "Teacher Luna, is it delicious?" "Yes, it's delicious. The rainbow fried rice made by Amy's father is really delicious." Luna nodded. She looked up at Meg with a smile, and said, "The food you make is very special and delicious." "Thank you." Meg nodded with a smile. He could feel that her vigilance seemed to have lessened a lot. "Teacher Luna, besides the rainbow fried rice, Father's Ruggiamo is also very delicious. Try one," Amy looked at Luna and recommended. Luna looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 7:10. Although she was a little tempted by Amy's words, she still shook her head with a smile and said, "No, I have to go to class today. I'll come back next time." She took out a delicate purse from her pocket. "Okay." Amy was a little disappointed. She didn't let Teacher Amy eat the delicious Ruggiamo. She could only wait for the next time. "Miss Luna, today's meal is a small gift from me. You don't have to pay the bill," Meg said to Luna. "Host, the system suggests that you don't give free meals to customers. You refuse to give credit to customers. Be a classy and principled restaurant." The system's solemn voice sounded. "Do you have a girlfriend?" Meg asked calmly. The system was silent for a while, and then replied, "The system doesn't need a girlfriend." "That's right. You're so stingy that you don't even have friends. How can you have a girlfriend?" Meg looked at Luna with a mocking smile. This lady is so nice to Amy. What's wrong with giving her a free meal? She doesn't even have a girlfriend. System, you should just focus on selling your food. A line of ellipses silently floated through Meg's mind. "No, of course I have to pay for my meal in a restaurant." Luna shook her head and said seriously. She counted 6 gold coins from the purse and put them on the table. She reached out and patted Amy's head, then got up and prepared to leave. "Wait a moment." Meg didn't force her. Some people were just like that. He said goodbye to Luna and quickly walked to the kitchen. Luna looked at Meg's back with a little confusion. She hesitated for a moment and stood there, not in a hurry to leave. A minute later, Meg came out with a craft paper bag in his hand. He handed it to Luna with a smile and said, "This is the restaurant's new product. It's not officially on sale yet. If Miss Luna doesn't mind, perhaps you can taste it and see if there's anything that needs to be improved." "Okay, thank you." Luna looked at the smile on Meg's face and the expectant look on Amy's face. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took the bag. She could feel the sincerity of the father and daughter, and it would be unreasonable to refuse. The rich aroma of meat wafted out of the bag. When she opened the bag, she saw a snow-white pancake with various kinds of meat inside. This should be the Ruggiamo Amy mentioned. Luna, who was already 70% full, suddenly felt a little hungry. She looked at Amy with a smile and said, "Then I'll leave first. Amy, if you still want to come to class, you can come to the school yourself. You can come to all my classes." "Okay, Miss Luna. But I've been learning the multiplication table from Father recently." Amy nodded. The multiplication table? Luna was a little confused. She didn't know what Meg had taught Amy, but she really didn't have time to find out today. She nodded at Meg and turned to walk towards the door. Chapter 49. "Yes, we have a new dish today," Meg said to Mobai with a nod and a smile. "Those who have subscribed to the crowdfunding list can try it today." Mobai sat down at his usual place, and then looked at Amy with a smile. "Good morning, little boss. Yangzhou fried rice is my favorite dish, but it would be a pity if I don't try Mr. Mac's new dish. I'll have a plate of Yangzhou fried rice this morning." "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded and went into the kitchen. Amy nodded. She leaned against the window and watched Luna disappear into the distance. "Good morning, Dwarf Mobai," she said without looking back. "Little boss, Amy, I have a small request. Can you remove the word dwarf from my name?" Mobai tried to make his voice as gentle as possible. Amy watched Luna disappear from her sight, then looked back at Mobai and nodded. "Okay, Dwarf Mobai." Mobai was speechless, but when he saw the innocent expression on Amy's face, he didn't suspect that she did it on purpose. What could he do? So be it. Dwarf is dwarf. I've given up anyway. Luna walked quickly toward the exit of the Aiden Square with the Rugiamo in her hand. Chaos School was not far from the Aiden Square, but it was so big that it would take her more than 10 minutes to walk through the square, even if she didn't walk on the crescent-shaped streets. Luna didn't know how many times she had swallowed her saliva as the aroma of the braised meat wafted into her nose. She didn't like meat, and was mostly a vegetarian, but now she couldn't help but want to take a bite of the Rugiamo. "Let's have a bite and try it." Finally, Luna couldn't help but stop under a big tree. She looked around to make sure there was no one around. Then she held the bag with both hands, pushed the Rugiamo up, and took a bite from the middle. 2 layers of soft and fragrant biji bread were sandwiched between the tender braised meat. As soon as she bit into it, the delicious gravy overflowed. Every taste bud on the tip of her tongue seemed to be cheering and jumping with joy. She couldn't help but close her eyes. After swallowing, the delicious taste seemed to become a little violent, running wildly in her blood, making her unable to help but let out a comfortable moan. Luna opened her eyes at once as she covered her mouth with her hand with a blushing face. Did that sound really come from me? How shameful. How could she make such a sound? She glanced around. Fortunately, there was no one around. Her shame subsided a little. She looked at the Rugiamo in her hand, and her expression became complicated. This Rugiamo was so delicious. But she didn't know what it was made of. After eating it, she felt her blood was restless, and she couldn't help making strange sounds. She was glad that she hadn't eaten it in the restaurant. If she had made that sound in front of Meg, she would have found a hole to hide in. Should I eat it or not? Luna was a little hesitant. The restlessness in her blood had gradually become a regular tide, and the discomfort at the beginning was gone. Coupled with the muscle relaxation brought by the Yangzhou fried rice, her vitality seemed to be awakened. However, her face was still red and a little hot. If this feeling continued to increase after eating it, perhaps her face would be very red the entire morning, right? The tempting aroma kept coming. Her mind was full of the extreme experience brought by the previous bite. Her hand holding the Rugiamo slowly moved up, and finally she couldn't help but open her mouth and take a bite. Forget it. This taste. I'll just blush. It's hot today anyway. Luna thought to herself as she ate the Rugiamo with both hands. She was completely immersed in the delicious taste of the Rugiamo. It's so delicious. Luna looked at the empty bag in her hand, stuck out her tongue and licked her oily lips, and praised sincerely. Today, she had tasted 2 of the most delicious foods in her life, and they were both made by the same man. It was indeed an interesting morning. Moreover, the restlessness in her blood had gradually calmed down after eating, and the redness on her face had also faded away. It was as if she had done a hearty exercise. She didn't do anything, but her body was adjusted to the best state, and she didn't feel tired at all after waking up early. What a magical food. Could it be that he's also a powerful magician? He must be a genius to give food such a magical ability. Feeling the changes in her body, Luna guessed in her heart. Just as she was about to throw the bag away, her eyes fell on the back of the little girl behind the bag, and she couldn't help but be stunned. Naturally, she recognized that it was Amy's back. Painting a special logo on an item wasn't anything new in Chaos City. In order to make customers remember their products, all the shops had racked their brains for ways to do so. However, no one would use a half-elf girl's back as a logo, because it might cause unnecessary trouble. No matter which race, there would always be people who discriminated against the combination of two races. They thought they were noble, and thought those poor half-breeds were inferior to them. Meg had used Amy's back as a logo in his restaurant, which might cause him a lot of trouble. Bullying half-breeds was not uncommon in this chaotic city. He's a good father, but I'd better remind him when I go to the restaurant next time. The drawing is pretty good, Luna murmured to herself. She checked the bag to make sure there was no oil stain, and then looked at the drawing of Amy on it. She folded the bag and put it in her pocket. Oh no, I'm definitely going to be late today. Luna raised her hand and looked at the wind-up watch on her wrist. Her expression changed, and she couldn't care less about being a lady in elegance. She lifted the hem of her dress and trotted toward the school. Meg came out with a plate of Yangzhou fried rice and put it in front of Mobai. He smiled and asked, "Why are you a little later than usual today, Mr. Mo?" "There was something I couldn't figure out last night, so I overslept this morning. I wanted to eat Mr. Mac's Yangzhou fried rice to wake myself up." Mobai picked up the spoon and put a spoonful into his mouth. After chewing a few times, he looked at Meg and asked, "Mr. Mac, let me ask you a question. If there is something that can release a lot of energy in an instant, how can it be turned into a long-range weapon?" Chapter 50. This world was more inclined toward magic and bloodline power. Firearms hadn't started to develop yet. In Meg's memory, even fireworks could only be seen during festivals in the imperial capital. The royal palace would set off fireworks to show the king's blessings to his people. The refining methods and formulas that were regarded as treasures by alchemists had yet to be circulated among the common people. Therefore, he was a little puzzled as to what Mobai was talking about. He asked curiously, "What kind of energy is that?" Mobai looked at Meg and hesitated for a moment. He put down his spoon and gestured with his hands. "It's like a compressed fireball suddenly exploding. It's about that kind of energy." Meg raised an eyebrow. Mobai's description was more like explosives. Although he didn't know what kind of energy it was, according to this train of thought, firearms were definitely the best choice to convert this energy into long-range attack. As long as the barrel of the gun could withstand that instantaneous explosion of energy, the sealed barrel could convert that energy into kinetic energy for the bullet, and thus, it could be used as a long-range attack. Meg had this idea. After all, he had lived in a world with a much more advanced technological civilization for so many years. When he was in the United States, he often spent time in shooting ranges, so he wasn't a novice when it came to firearms. His dismantling speed could even compete with his father's security guards. However, he was hesitant about the terrifying power of firearms. Once firearms appeared, they would definitely drag this continent, which had just ended the 1,000-year war among species, from the era of magic and cold weapons to the era of firearms. If humans got the technology to make firearms, they would be the largest race. Humans, who had relied on magic casters and knights to barely occupy a corner of the continent in the past, would definitely become more powerful. The balance of the Norland continent might be broken again, and a new round of war among species would be set off. After having Amy, Meg's wish was world peace. This kind of thing was like Pandora's box. Once it was opened, there was no way to close it. Meg didn't want to get it out. Although he didn't intend to provide any ideas, Meg still looked at Mobai curiously, and asked, "I'm very curious. What do you want to do with it?" "I want to slay a dragon," Mobai said seriously as he looked into Meg's eyes. "Do the dragons have a grudge against you? Why do you all want to kill it?" Aren't dragon babies cute too? Amy, who was sitting next to him, asked in confusion. The uncle who liked to laugh wanted to slay a dragon, and the dwarf grandpa also wanted to slay a dragon. What exactly was a dragon? Why did everyone want to slay dragons so often? Meg was also a little surprised. It didn't sound strange for Conti to say that he was going to slay a dragon. Apart from the black donkey, all of his equipment had been prepared to slay a dragon. However, hearing Mawbai say that he wanted to slay a dragon, if not for his serious expression, Meg would have laughed out loud. Mr. Mac must think it's funny. It's okay, I think so too. Mawbai laughed a little self-deprecatingly. Just when Meg thought that this was really just a joke that Mawbai said early in the morning, he slowly clenched his fists and said in a slightly low voice, "But for me, I'm afraid this is the only thing that supports me to continue to live and to continue to wield the hammer. The red dragon that ate my father when I was 30 years old still appears on the continent to do evil. If I can't kill it with my own hands, I probably won't be able to close my eyes when I die. But I don't have Meg Alex's ability. If I want to slay a dragon, I can only think of other ways. But now, it seems that if this core problem isn't solved, all the previous efforts will be in vain." Meg looked at Mawbai, who clenched his fists and had a few blue veins on his forehead, and his mood became a little complicated. Conti Nicholas wanted to slay a dragon to prove himself and add the title of Dragon Slayer in front of his name. Mawbai, on the other hand, wanted revenge. They had the same goal, but their goals were completely different. "My condolences." After hesitating for a while, Meg could only apologize. He couldn't overturn the entire continent for Mawbai's wish. However, Mawbai's experience had also given him a reminder that this world was far from as peaceful as it appeared to be. Even though most of the people in Chaos City were under the control of the Grey Temple, how were they going to protect themselves if an evil dragon were to attack them? Chapter 51. Laji Rugiemo. Haebang was a little confused. It was as confusing as the Yangzhou fried rice. But at least he heard the word meat in the name. His interest was immediately piqued, and he said expectantly, "Boss Mag, give me 2 first." "Me, too," Haega added. Haega added. He was also looking forward to it. Meat was their favorite dish. Although Yangzhou fried rice was delicious, there was too little meat in it. "Okay, please wait a moment," Meg answered and went into the kitchen. "Mr. Mo, you're always the first to come," Haebang said with a smile, pulling out the chair opposite Mawbai and sitting down. "I'm not the first to come today. A human girl came earlier than me," Mawbai said, shaking his head. "Little girl, good morning," Haega said to Amy with a silly smile. "Morning, big blockhead." Amy nodded. Looking at the animal tooth in his mouth, she asked curiously, "Won't it be inconvenient for you to eat with your teeth exposed?" I'm used to it." Haega shook his head with a smile. "Mine are neat." Amy bared her teeth at Haega, revealing a mouthful of neat little teeth, as if she was showing off. Haega giggled and sat down next to Haebang, waiting for Meg to serve. After a while, Meg came out with 3 Rugiamos in a brown paper bag, 1 for each of them. "It smells so good. Is this Laji Rugiamo? There's a lot of meat." Holding the Rugiamo, Haebang couldn't help swallowing because of the rich meat aroma. The white baiji bread in the paper bag was full of meat, fat and lean, glistening with oil, which was very attractive. "It's really different from Yangzhou fried rice. I've never smelled such a special meat aroma. It's the most delicious." Mawbai looked at the Rugiamo in his hand and couldn't help praising it. He ate the last bite of Yangzhou fried rice in his bowl. "No, I have to try it first." Haebang tore a hole in the paper bag and swallowed half of the Rugiamo in one gulp. The sweet bhaji bread wrapped around the streaky pork that had absorbed the delicious gravy. With a bite, the delicious gravy seeped into the bhaji bread, and the soft meat melted in the mouth. It tasted so delicious that the desire of the taste buds for meat was greatly satisfied, as if every one of them was jumping with joy. What was even more amazing to Haebang was that the Rujiamo seemed to turn into a ball of fire and roll down his throat. It was as if he had swallowed a mouthful of strong liquor. His blood began to boil as if something in his body had been awakened. Roar! Haebang couldn't help but raise his head and let out a beastly roar, which shook the table in front of him. Amy raised her eyebrows, looking a little unhappy as she stretched out her hand. But before she could release the fire, Meg gently grasped her little hand and shook his head with a smile, indicating that she shouldn't set the fire. He looked at Haebang curiously. It was not difficult to see that Haebang didn't roar on purpose. The system had said that the less wild the race, the less effective the Rujiamo would be. Haebang, as an orc, was much wilder than human beings, so it wasn't strange for him to have such a strong reaction. But he didn't know what effect it would have. Malbai and Hege were startled by Haebang's roar, but they didn't worry about the Rujiamo because they had tasted the effect of Yangzhou fried rice on relieving fatigue. Instead, they looked at Haebang expectantly, wondering what special effect it would have. After letting out a bestial roar, Haebang felt his bestial blood boil. He looked at Amy and saw that there was no fireball in her hand. He let out a sigh of relief and said with an embarrassed smile, "I couldn't control myself. I didn't mean to. Mag, your Rujiamo is so delicious. It's just that the effect is a little. My blood is boiling, and my strength seems to have increased a little." "Yes." Meg nodded with a smile. Malbai and Hege's eyes lit up, and they took a bite of their Rujiamos at the same time. The pungent taste of the Rujiamo intoxicated both of them. After swallowing the Rujiamo, the feeling of their blood boiling made them involuntarily let out a soft roar. Malbai's roar wasn't loud, but Hege's was similar to Haebang's. After roaring, he scratched his head embarrassedly and said to Amy, I'm sorry." Amy nodded and said, "It's your first time, big blockhead. Forget it, but someone should be careful." I will. Haebang replied while nodding consciously. However, he couldn't help taking another big bite. He was addicted to the taste of the delicious meat and bhaji bread. After swallowing it down, Haebang immediately covered his mouth with his hand and didn't make any more roars. Hege also took a bite and covered his mouth to control his roar, immersing himself in the delicious food. Delicious. "Mr. Mac, give me 5 more. Haebang put the bag on the table and looked at Meg. His face was still red, and he looked a little excited. After finishing the Rujiamo, he felt the benefits of the Rujiamo. Not only did it stimulate his body, but it could also stimulate his bloodline potential and improve his physical strength. I also have 5. Hege also held out 5 fingers to Meg. "It's delicious, but I don't think my old bones can stand it anymore. This is enough." Malbai shook his head and felt the blood surging in his body. Although he got used to it quickly and felt a little comfortable, he still preferred the nourishing feeling of Yangzhou fried rice. Meg shook his head with a smile. "Today is a taste test, so we can only provide 3 Rujiamos per meal. Maybe we need to make some improvements. We'll start selling the Rujiamos tomorrow, and there won't be any restrictions. However, the amount of ingredients for each meal is limited. First come, first served." He didn't plan to make too many Rujiamos for today's taste test. It was not the best time to marinate the meat, and the taste test was just a warm-up for tomorrow's official sale. He didn't want to sell too many Rujiamos, and it would be better if more people could eat them. Chapter 52. Meg looked at Haebang and Hege, who were full of expectation, and hesitated a little. He wasn't tempted by the double price. It was no different from a scalper to raise the price based on the limited edition. But Heibang and Heiga's crowdfunding had helped him a lot yesterday. Otherwise, Amy wouldn't have been able to eat the delicious rujiamo today. He thought for a moment and nodded with a smile. The new dish was made earlier because of your crowdfunding, so you can eat as many as you want today. You don't have to double the price. Just 300 copper coins per rujiamo is enough. Really? Mr. Mac, you're so nice. I'll take 5 more, and so will my brother. Heibang's eyes lit up. Meg was really different from those treacherous human businessmen. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded and turned to walk into the kitchen. Little boss, the bill. Mabai finished eating. He had a plate of Yangzhou fried rice and a rujiamo with la ji. The tiredness from staying up late last night was instantly swept away. And after eating the rujiamo, he felt much better. His blood was flowing faster, and his mind was much clearer. When he put the bag on the table, he noticed the half-elf girl's back painted on the back of the bag. He was a little surprised, but also felt that this was how it should be. Although he had only known Meg for a few days, he could see that his love for Amy was genuine. He was a good father. Therefore, even though Amy was a half-elf and didn't have a mother by her side, she didn't have the cowardice that was common among half-elves. Now that she was spoiled, she completely ignored this point. Apart from being cute, she was also quite brave. But using this back as the restaurant's logo might cause some trouble, right? Mabai thought to himself. But on second thought, even Amy's fireball could make Heibang afraid, so how could Meg be an ordinary person? He seemed to be a smart man. Amy walked over and thought for a moment. That's 9 gold coins in total. Okay, then just deduct it from the crowdfunding, Mabai said, standing up with a smile. Oh. Amy nodded. She walked to the kitchen door and looked at Meg, who was making rujiamo, and said, Father, Grandpa Dwarf Mabai said we can deduct the 9 gold coins from yesterday's bill. Is that okay? Of course, that's what we wrote yesterday. With a smile, Meg came out with 2 plates, each with 2 rujiamos. For Heibang and Heiga, the paper bag was a hindrance. It was better to put the rujiamos directly on the plates. Of course, the most important thing was that taking the dishes out directly could save the cost of the bag by 5 copper coins. After all, the dishes would be washed automatically in the dishwasher. Let's go, Mr. Mac, Mabai said with a smile and turned to leave. Mr. Mac, your food is so delicious. I don't want to go back to the tribe. Heibang picked up a rujiamo and took a big bite. He looked at Meg and praised, feeling the blood rushing in his body. This was much better than drinking strong liquor. He could enjoy the delicious food and increase his strength at the same time. There was nothing better than this. Meg stood at the side with a smile. Being praised was something that made him feel good. Heiga also nodded. Because he was not fluent in the common language, he gave Meg a thumbs up. It seems that today's new dish is coming out. Mr. Mac, give me a new dish. Conti came in and looked at Heibang and Heiga, who were holding a white biscuit in their hands and eating it. The tempting aroma of meat floated in the air. He looked at Meg and smiled. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded with a smile and turned to enter the kitchen. The smile on Conti's face seemed to never disappear. No matter who it was, he always had a cheerful smile on his face. Good morning, little boss. Conti sat down in his usual seat and said to Amy with a smile. Good morning, Uncle Smiley. Amy nodded. This uncle was smiling all the time, as if he was wearing a smiley face mask. This rujiamo is delicious today. It tastes amazing. Haebang turned to look at Conti and said while chewing, I highly recommend it. Okay, I'll try it. Conti looked forward to it even more. After a while, Meg came out with a paper bag with a Ruggiemo in it. He handed it to Conti with a smile. Your Ruggiemo. Conti took it. His eyes were first attracted by the drawing of the little girl's back. He looked up at Meg with a smile and said, Mr. Mac, you drew the little boss, didn't you? Really? Amy, who had been lying on the counter in boredom, suddenly had her eyes lit up. She slipped down from the bar stool, walked to the table, and stood on tiptoe to take a look. When she saw the little girl's back on the paper bag, she was pleasantly surprised. Father, is this really Amy? Did Father draw her? Yes, it's Amy. There's no better representative in our restaurant than Amy. Meg nodded with a smile and reached out to stroke Amy's head. Father, you're so awesome. You drew it so well, Amy said happily, rubbing Meg's hand. When the three people in the restaurant saw this scene, they all let out kind smiles. This kind of heartwarming scene made them a little envious. Furthermore, the back view of the adorable half-elf girl on the bag was going to become famous in Chaos City very soon. Conti picked up the Ruggiemo and looked at it. The white pancake was cut in the middle and filled with fat and lean meat. Ruggiemo was very appropriate. He had never seen a pancake made like this. It was so special. He opened his mouth and took a bite. The soft and chewy bhaji bread and the soft and fragrant braised meat mixed together in the sauce. The wonderful taste spread in his mouth, making him feel as if his whole body had been sublimated. After swallowing, Conti couldn't help but let out a loud yawn. When he came back to himself, he looked at the others and smiled awkwardly. But to his surprise, after swallowing the Ruggiemo, the blood in his body seemed to become restless. It was even more vigorous than when he had practiced swordsmanship for an hour in the morning. It adjusted his body to the best state in an instant. It was as magical as Yangzhou fried rice. Boss, I'd like 2 more Ruggiemos, Conti said to Meg with a smile. He hadn't finished the Ruggiemo in his hand yet. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded and went into the kitchen in a good mood. Chapter 53. Little. Board, Bill, please. After finishing 5 Ruggiemos, Hege turned to Amy and stuck out 2 fingers with a silly smile. 2 people. Big brother, are you going to pay for me today? Haebang's eyes lit up. He looked at Hege in surprise and was very happy. His big brother was finally enlightened and became honest again. Hege nodded with a silly smile. 12 Ruggiemos, that's 36 gold coins. Amy came over and was also a little surprised. Big fool, are you going to pay for me today? Just pay for it. Hege nodded with a silly smile. Oh. Amy nodded. When she turned around, she sighed softly and said to herself, hey, it's easy to collect money without money. When will I finish paying for it? I really want to count money. Big brother, you are still my good big brother. Haebang patted Hege's shoulder happily. The 18 gold coins were not the most important thing. This change was what made him happy. Hege nodded with a silly smile. He took out the crowdfunding ticket from his pocket and placed it on the table. He said in the orc language, I'm going back to the tribe. I'll leave today. I'll leave this ticket to you. You can keep the rest. Just treat it as if you bought it yourself. I bought it. No, didn't you borrow money from me to buy it? You've even eaten several meals in the past 2 days. Now you're saying that I bought it. So, was the meal just now my treat, or was it your treat? Haebang looked at Hege in confusion. The image of a big brother that he had just reconstructed was collapsing again. Just treat it as my treat. Isn't it on my coupon? Haga thought for a moment, and then nodded. Okay, let's not talk about that now. But big brother, why are you going back to the tribe today? We are not out shopping. Didn't you say that we would be gone for a month? We still have many things to buy and weapons to make. Why are we going back now? Haga waved his hand and looked at Haga in confusion. The Limestone tribe had a conflict with our tribe because of the gold mine. There was a small-scale battle the day before yesterday. 2 of our tribe's warriors died and a small gold mine was taken by them. My father asked me to go back and lead the tribe's warriors to take back the gold mine and avenge our fallen brothers. Haga's expression turned serious. The smile on his face disappeared. For the first time, he had the dignity of an orc warrior. Those bastards are here again. It seems that the lesson I gave them last year wasn't enough. Big brother, let me go back and teach them a lesson. Haebang clenched his fists, his joints cracking, and the blue veins on his forehead bulging. No, you have to stay this time. Weapons are the most important thing for our warriors. You have to bring them all back to the tribe safely. Haga shook his head, patted Haebang's shoulder, and said with concern, and your waist injury from last year hasn't healed yet. You should rest for a while before going to battle. I'm completely healed. I can smash those guys' heads with my stick. If you don't believe me, you can see. Ha Xian stood up and wanted to show Ha Jie how to do it. My father said Marcus is leading the team this time. You are no match for him, and I want to kill him with my own hands. Haga's face was a little cold. He clenched his fists, then slowly loosened them. He patted Haebang's shoulder, picked up his mace, and walked out. Haebang's expression became a little complicated when he heard that name. He stood up and looked at Haga's back. Big brother, I'll go back with you. No need. You buy all the things you need. I'll be back in a few days. Mr. Mac's food is so delicious. Haga shook his head, turned around and smiled at Amy. Bye, little boss. Bye, big idiot. Amy waved her hand, then slipped under the high stool and whispered to Big Egg. Marcus, that damn guy, how dare he invade our tribe with his people? Damn him. Haebang gnashed his teeth and watched Haga's figure disappear at the door. He sat back down helplessly. Tribal conflict. Mag turned around and glanced at Haebang. His predecessor could speak the orc language. Because the territories of humans and orcs were neighbors, and most of his achievements in the past were from the orcs, he could understand the orc language completely and carry out simple conversations. As for the elven language, it was even easier. Otherwise, how could the elven princess be flirted with? Although he was a little curious, Meg didn't want to take the initiative to ask. Unless the customer wanted to talk, he wouldn't take the initiative to ask about personal matters. He wasn't that kind of person. After sitting in silence for a while, Haebang turned around and said to Meg, Mr. Mac, give me another plate of Yangzhou fried rice. I want to calm down with delicious food. Okay, please wait a moment, Meg answered. He quickly made a plate of Yangzhou fried rice and put it in front of Haebang. Haebang picked up the spoon, then put it down again. He looked up at Meg and asked, Mr. Mac, if there was a guy who used to be your brother, but later he accidentally killed your most beloved woman, don't you think that guy deserved to die? Maybe. Meg nodded slightly. Even Haga himself didn't know how to deal with this kind of thing. Grace was my big brother's fiancée, and they grew up together. Marcus was from the Limestone tribe, and was the same age as my big brother. At that time, our tribe hadn't discovered the gold mine yet. We were like brothers with the Limestone tribe, and the children played together. My big brother and Marcus were the leaders of the children of the 2 tribes, and they often led the children of the 2 tribes to fight. They were equal in strength, and gradually became good brothers. Later, our tribe discovered the gold mine. The originally poor tribe suddenly became rich, and everything changed. The limestone tribe wanted a share of the profits. Originally, my father agreed to give them 1 or 2 small gold mines so that they could get rid of the starvation situation. But they were greedy, and directly asked for half of our gold mines, and they wanted the biggest one. Naturally, our tribe didn't agree, and we refused to give them the small gold mine. Therefore, the 2 tribes started a conflict that lasted for more than 10 years, and some people on both sides died. Chapter 54. Heartwarming's story was simple and straightforward, but it made people sigh with emotion. "It's a sad story," Meg said softly after a moment of silence. "Yes, Marcus hasn't shown up in the limestone tribe for many years. I didn't expect him to lead a team to attack the gold mine. I'm afraid my elder brother will settle the score with him this time." Heartwarming nodded with a complicated expression. When he was a child, he had always followed his elder brother Marcus, and Marcus had taken good care of him. But now, because of the conflict between the 2 tribes and Grace's death, they had become enemies. "I don't care. They will have to make a decision sooner or later. From the moment Grace fell, I knew that one of them would die." Heartwarming picked up the spoon again and scooped a spoonful of fried rice. He didn't say anything else. "Mr. Mac, the bill," Condy said to Meg with a smile. "Okay. 3 rugiamos, 9 gold coins. I'll deduct it from the crowdfunding voucher." Meg nodded with a smile. "Okay." Condy stood up, picked up the long sword on the table, and patted Heartwarming's shoulder. "Bro, he'll win." "Okay," Heartwarming replied and continued to eat his fried rice. Condy glanced at the counter. Seeing that Amy didn't come out to say hello, he was a little disappointed. After finishing his Yangzhou fried rice, Heartwarming also left with his mace. Meg could clearly feel that he was a little depressed. Soon, other customers came. After hearing that there was a new dish today, some of them also wanted to try it. 300 copper coins was much cheaper than 600 copper coins, although it was still expensive. Meg was used to the strange noises and embarrassed expressions of the customers after eating their first mouthful of rugiamo. Anyway, they couldn't resist the temptation and kept eating. 1.5 hours of breakfast passed quickly. Meg went to the door and turned over the sign. Then he took all the plates back to the kitchen, washed them quickly with the dishwasher, and was about to wipe the table. "Father! Come and see. Is the ugly duckling about to hatch?" Amy suddenly shouted with joy and surprise in her voice. "Now?" Meg was surprised. He walked behind the counter and squatted down beside Amy. The rustling sound was still coming from the big egg wrapped in the blanket, but it was clearer and more urgent than yesterday, as if a little life was waiting to be born. "Amy, what did you say to it?" Meg asked curiously. She was still an egg baby, but she seemed to be scared out of her wits and was in a hurry to come out. "I was encouraging it." Amy nodded seriously. "Then how do you encourage them?" Meg's expression was a little weird. "Ugly duckling, listen to me and come out. Otherwise, I'll set it on fire. I'm super fierce." Amy clenched her little fists and said seriously. Meg couldn't help but laugh. What kind of encouragement was that? It was a blatant threat. No wonder the little guy inside was scratching the eggshell so hard. It was probably scared out of its wits. "Father, does it think I'm lying to it? That's why it refused to come out even after I called it for so long. Can I really set it on fire?" Amy looked at Meg and threw out her questions one after another with a conflicted expression on her little face. "If I set it on fire with a fireball, then I can really peel it open and eat the roasted egg directly." Meg thought to himself. Just as he was thinking about how to make Amy be more patient, the big egg suddenly made a soft cracking sound. Amy and Meg were stunned for a moment. They both stared with wide eyes at the big egg with a small crack on its shell. "Ugly duckling, come out quickly. Although I know you're ugly, I'm pretty." Amy looked at the big egg expectantly. "You really have my style when I was young. It's probably hereditary." Meg looked at Amy. His girl's sharp tongue could be said to be self-taught. She was a typical talented contestant. It could be said that she was a high-quality unpolished jade waiting to be carved. As long as he gave her some guidance and grooming, her cute appearance and soft voice would definitely make people choke to death when she used her sharp tongue. Yet, it was impossible to get angry at her. It was simply awesome. After transmigrating because of his sharp tongue in his previous life, Meg was much more honest in this life. At most, he would diss the system. He looked at this world with tolerance and love. Otherwise, there were too many things he could complain about and use his sharp tongue in this world. It wouldn't be long before he was sent to another world by the system. He couldn't bear to part with Amy. But Amy was different. Although her sharp tongue was very refreshing, the people who were hit by it wouldn't be too resentful. They would forgive relatively quickly, so there was no need to worry about this problem. "Looks like it's time to put the sharp tongue lesson on the agenda." Meg looked at Amy and nodded slightly. In the past 2 days, she had completely memorized the multiplication table. She was also learning the addition and subtraction of the decimal system and simple 2-digit multiplication. It wouldn't take long for her to master the calculations used in daily life. Amy's learning ability was still very good. The cracks on the eggshell extended from one to many, starting from the top and spreading to the entire surface of the eggshell. The fine cracks soon covered the entire eggshell. Mag was also looking on expectantly. What was this thing that had hatched? It was an egg, and it was situated on a cliff, so it was most likely some kind of bird. However, it was so big, so it definitely wasn't an ordinary bird. Perhaps it was some kind of magic beast. "Ugly duckling, I'll count to 3. If you don't come out obediently, I'll set it on fire." Amy's patience was quickly worn out. She opened her big blue eyes and said as she stretched out her hand. Pop, with a soft pop, a furry little head with half of the eggshell on top of it poked out of the big egg. A pair of half-closed little eyes looked around in confusion and fear. Finally, it fixed its gaze on Amy and opened its mouth to call out softly, "Meow, orange, orange cat." Meg's eyes widened. The little thing with a piece of eggshell on its head was a little orange and white kitten. Its eyes were not fully open, and there was still a little egg on its fur. It was looking at Amy with half-closed eyes. It was so cute. Chapter 55. This could be a fake ugly duckling. Meg said with a strange expression as he looked at the little orange cat that was meowing at Amy. How was he going to explain this? An oviparous cat. Darwin's coffin might not be able to hold on for much longer. However, on second thought, perhaps in this world, after natural selection, the oviparous cat had defeated the viviparous cat and become the mainstream. After all, this was a different world. 9 out of 10 orange cats were fat, and one of them was so fat that it would collapse. In his previous life, he had a dog and a cat. That cat was a super fat orange cat. Looking at the palm-sized adorable orange cat that had just opened its eyes, Meg couldn't help but want to touch it. Touching a cat was a pleasurable thing. But it came out of Ugly Duckling's egg. This egg is correct, right? Then it must be Ugly Duckling. Amy nodded with certainty. Looking at the little orange cat, she said with a little disdain, "But you're really ugly. You even have 2 extra legs. You can't swim, right? I'll call you Ugly Duckling from now on." Maybe we can change its name, like Orange, Small Orange, Big Orange, or something like that. Meg tried to negotiate. Naming an orange cat Ugly Duckling was too difficult for it. No, father. It's really Ugly Duckling. You can't just change its name. Amy looked at Meg and shook her head seriously. Meow, the little orange cat that was still in the egg shook its head, as if to express that it didn't like this name. Well, I know you like this name very much too, right? Amy nodded with a smile. She reached out and removed the piece of eggshell from the little orange cat's head. Then, with a serious expression, she said, Ugly Duckling, when I call you, you have to answer obediently. From today onwards until you grow up to become a white swan, I'll treat you well. After saying that, Amy couldn't help but swallow her saliva. Meow, the little orange cat immediately cowered. It nodded its little head and opened its mouth to meow. If it's an ugly duckling, then so be it. Meg looked at the little orange cat pitifully. In Amy's eyes, most of the things that came out of the egg were ugly ducklings. Moreover, this was Amy's pet, so of course, she could call it whatever she wanted. However, this little guy could not be raised to become a white swan. Amy's wish of raising a reserve of food was probably going to be dashed. In fact, Meg also seriously doubted that this was a normal orange cat. After all, the herb gatherers had found it on a cliff in the wild, and it didn't have wings on its back. He didn't know what it would look like when it grew up. Meg suddenly thought of a charmingly naive chinchilla, but he shook his head and shook it out of his mind. It'd better not be as fat as that bull. This little guy now looked no different from an orange kitten. He didn't know if it was because it was oviparous, but it looked like it was about a week or 2 old kitten. It stretched out 2 small white paws and put them on the edge of the eggshell, trying to crawl out by itself. However, it was really too small and didn't have enough strength. After struggling for a long time, it still couldn't get out. It could only look at Amy pitifully with its sapphire-like eyes and meow twice like a child asking for help. It seemed that it had started to rely on Amy. I really don't know what to do with you. Although Amy said that with disdain, her little hand had already reached out, intending to grab it out. Wait a minute, we have to wipe it clean first. Meg quickly got up to get a clean towel and helped Amy get the little guy out of the eggshell. After wiping it clean, the towel was rolled up, leaving only its little head outside, looking innocently at Meg and Amy. Father, it looks so delicious. Amy looked at the little orange kitten that was rolled up, and her eyes suddenly lit up. It looks like a cat roll. Meg also wanted to laugh a little. The 2 little guys were too cute. Meow. Meow. The little orange kitten, which had been lying quietly on the ground, suddenly became uneasy. It raised its head and meowed twice, struggling to get out. Ugly duckling, be good. I won't eat you now. Be good, don't be afraid. Amy reached out to touch the little orange kitten's head and said with a smile. The little kitten, which had been a little anxious, was immediately comforted and fell asleep just like that. Let it sleep for a while. We have to prepare something for it to eat. Meg looked at Amy with a smile. It seemed that it had used up a lot of energy to rush out in a hurry. It would be hungry when it woke up later. Ugly duckling is really a little lazy worm. It fell asleep just after touching it. Amy withdrew her hand with a look of disdain. She looked at Meg and said, then what does it want to eat? Is rainbow fried rice okay? No, it's a newborn kitten. Ugly duckling can't eat rainbow fried rice. It needs goat's milk or cow's milk. Let's go out and buy some milk for it. Meg shook his head. He had personally raised that orange kitten when it was a kitten, so he was very experienced. System, do you have milk bottles for sale? Meg suddenly remembered and asked in his mind. The system doesn't provide baby products, the system answered seriously. I don't have much cash left. You'd better be honest with your price. This little guy will be able to lick his own plate in a few days. I don't care if I buy it or not, Meg said calmly. 1 high-grade milk bottle and 1 pet scarf for free. Only 5 gold coins. A glowing message floated in front of Meg. If you give me 2 scarves, I'll take 1, Meg said after thinking for a while. High-grade milk bottle and 2 pet scarves have been delivered to the first compartment on the counter. Host, please check. The system's voice sounded and then disappeared immediately. Meg opened the door to take a look. A brand new milk bottle and 2 cute scarves were already in place. They were just right for feeding milk. As for why he didn't buy milk from the system, it was because the system didn't sell ingredients outside of the menu. Even if it did, it would probably be very expensive. Maybe it was produced by a cow raised in some holy land. He didn't have many gold coins left, and he was going to save some to buy strength points. Naturally, he couldn't waste money casually. Okay. Amy nodded after hearing Meg's words. She carefully put Ugly Duckling into the basket and gently covered it with the quilt. She got up and took Meg's hand. After taking a few steps out, she looked back at the little basket worriedly. But father, if Ugly Duckling wakes up when we go out, will it be scared? I feel like it's treating me as its mother. It probably won't wake up so soon. Meg shook his head with a smile. It wouldn't take long to go out and buy milk, but Amy was still very smart. She knew that Ugly Duckling, which had seen her for the first time since it was born, had already treated her as its most trusted person. And although Amy said that she didn't like it, it was obvious that this was her first time raising a pet, and she actually liked this little guy very much. Chapter 56. Meg and Amy came back very quickly. Apart from teasing Black Coal and Green Pea when they passed by the magic potion shop, they bought a can of goat's milk very smoothly. It only cost them 20 copper coins, and it even came with a bamboo jar. This made Meg feel that he was a little too greedy. As soon as he opened the door, there were a few meows coming from inside. It sounded a little anxious. Ugly Duckling, don't be afraid. You're so ugly. You'll be fine even if you're alone at home, Amy said as she slipped under Meg's hand and trotted over. This consolation is really refreshing. Meg entered the door with a smile and put the goat's milk on the counter. The little towel in the basket had been messed up by Ugly Duckling. It put its paws on the edge of the basket and looked at Amy with tears in its eyes like an abandoned child. It was very pitiful. Okay. I'll bring you with me next time. Sigh, I really don't know what to do with you. Amy sighed and reached out to touch Ugly Duckling's head. Ugly Duckling immediately closed its eyes and showed a look of enjoyment. It stopped meowing. Meg smiled. Although Amy said that she would eat him when she grew up, she would definitely develop a good relationship with it after spending time with it. He didn't want to keep lecturing Amy. It would be best if he could let her feel that friends and playmates were rare and precious. Just like Black Coal, he could turn enemies into friends. Eating him was just a little obsession of the little foodie with roast goose. It wasn't that scary. He took the milk bottle from the cupboard into the kitchen and boiled the pacifier and the straw for a while to disinfect it at high temperature. Then, he poured the fresh goat's milk into the clean milk bottle and put it in warm water to warm it up. He dripped it on the back of his hand to test the temperature. Then, he put the remaining fresh goat's milk into the fridge and went out with the milk bottle. Father, what's this? Amy asked curiously as she looked at the milk bottle in Meg's hand. The goat's milk was in a transparent jar, and there was something soft on the top. What was it for? Meow, Ugly Duckling's eyes also fell on the milk bottle. Perhaps it smelled the milk, and its eyes were filled with stars. It stuck out its little tongue and licked it. It seemed that it was starving. This is a milk bottle for babies and small animals to drink milk, just like this. Meg put the pacifier next to Ugly Duckling's mouth with a smile. The temptation of the milk and its sucking instinct made the little fellow quickly, and made sounds. The white goat's milk flowed down the side of its mouth and dripped onto the white fur in front of its chest. It enjoyed it. The lactose content of goat milk was relatively low, and Ugly Duckling was about the size of a 2-week-old kitten. It was also wild, so it should be able to withstand goat milk, right? Meg thought to himself, if it really doesn't work, I'll just buy milk powder for kittens from the system. The price is probably a little high. That's amazing. Father, can I feed it? Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at Meg expectantly. Of course, but Ugly Duckling can't bathe now. It'll be troublesome if it gets dirty, so I have to put a scarf on it. Meg put the milk bottle in Amy's hand, and got up to take a scarf with a flower pattern on it from the cupboard. He wanted to take off the milk bottle and put it on, but the little thing seemed to have seen through his intention. It sucked on the pacifier tightly and refused to let go. He had no choice but to ask Amy to raise the milk bottle so that it could eat while putting the scarf on it. Meg looked at Amy, who was holding the milk bottle with both hands and carefully feeding Ugly Duckling the goat's milk, and said, "Then Amy will feed it. This bottle is enough. I'll go and prepare the ingredients for lunch." "Okay, I'll feed it while." Amy nodded. Looking at Ugly Duckling, who was enjoying the milk, she murmured doubtfully, "Is it really that good?" Ugly Duckling seemed to understand Amy's words. It drank the milk and nodded. Jiang Hong went into the kitchen to wash his hands. He took out several large pieces of meat from the fridge, cut them into large slices, and marinated them in a large vat. The most important part of the cured meat was the cured meat. The cured meat from last night was enough for today and tomorrow morning would be the best time. Therefore, he had to marinate the meat that would be used the day after tomorrow to make sure that the cured meat had the best texture and that every Rugiamo tasted the same and delicious. After Meg finished marinating the meat, he went out of the kitchen to check on Amy. However, as soon as he went out, he saw Amy sitting on the ground, holding a milk bottle and sucking happily. Ugly Duckling was lying on the edge of the basket. It looked up at Meg, and then at Amy, who was holding the milk bottle, and tears of grievance welled up in its eyes. Sure enough, it's not reliable to let a little foodie feed it. She even took the cat's food. Meg smiled with resignation. "Amy, why did you eat Ugly Duckling's food? What will it eat then?" "Because I was worried that it would eat too much, so I helped it eat a little." Amy took another sip of milk, and then turned to Ugly Duckling. "Am I right, Ugly Duckling?" "Meow." Ugly Duckling meowed reluctantly. It looked at Meg pitifully and wagged its little tail. "As a master, you really don't have any dignity at all." Meg looked at Ugly Duckling, who was wagging its tail. Back then, when his fat cat put the meat to its mouth, it would reluctantly take a bite with a proud expression. "Amy, do you like to drink goat's milk?" Meg asked Amy, who was happily drinking from the milk bottle. "Yes, yes. Goat's milk is delicious." Amy nodded vigorously, and the pacifier in her mouth didn't come out. "All right, then I'll prepare some for you next time. Get some calcium and grow taller." Meg nodded with a smile. In the past, Amy rarely had the chance to drink goat's milk. She had been so focused on the restaurant these days that she had forgotten about it. He bought another milk bottle from the system. He couldn't let Amy and Ugly Duckling share a milk bottle, could he? He warmed half a bottle of goat's milk for Ugly Duckling and half a bottle for Amy. Seeing the two little ones holding the milk bottle and sucking on it, he felt warm in his heart. Before he knew it, there was another little member in his family. The system has issued a new mission. Please sell 1,000 portions of La Giamo in 10 days. After the mission is completed, the reward will be unlocked, a recipe for tofu pudding. The mission has been completed. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's head. Another 1,000 portions. System, can't you be a little more creative with your mission? Won't I be disliked this way? Meg pursed his lips. Actually, he could also tell the difference. The ingredients had been changed to the number of portions that could be sold directly. It seemed that the system had learned its lesson after being defeated by him with crowdfunding last time. Selling the set number of dishes is to increase the restaurant's popularity as soon as possible. Please don't go down the wrong path. Learning to cook and running a restaurant seriously is the right way to become a god of cookery, the system lectured seriously. Chapter 57. The battle between the sweet and savory tofu pudding fans had been going on for a long time, and both sides were basically evenly matched. There was also the spicy tofu pudding fan in the middle. As long as there was a discussion, no matter which fan it was, they couldn't wait to drag out the dissenters and start a holy war over the flavor of tofu pudding. As a staunch fan of the savory tofu pudding, Meg naturally chose the savory tofu pudding. The tender tofu pudding was sprinkled with chopped pickled mustard, shrimp skin, wood ear, garlic, and a little soy sauce. Eating a bowl of steaming savory tofu pudding in the winter was simply a sublime experience. As for the sweet tofu pudding, what the hell was that? Meg didn't have any animosity towards the sweet tofu pudding fans, and he wouldn't draw his sword so easily. However, he was still very displeased by the fact that some restaurants only sold sweet tofu pudding. In his previous life, he had eaten at a famous restaurant in the middle of winter, and he had wanted a bowl of tofu pudding to warm himself up. In the end, only sweet tofu pudding was served. At that time, Meg didn't nitpick. He took a good picture of the restaurant's signboard, wrote down the restaurant's address, and then attached a picture of the savory tofu pudding. He wrote on Weibo, "It's so nice to come here to eat a bowl of savory tofu pudding in the cold winter." This was the first positive advertisement for a Weibo account with thousands of followers. Moreover, because Shinjining didn't leave any negative comments for the first time, it even became a trending topic for a few minutes. Later, it was said that the restaurant couldn't handle the anger of the savory tofu pudding fans who rushed over after hearing the news, but couldn't get a taste of the savory tofu pudding. Not long after, a savory tofu pudding was added to the menu. It was said that the number of customers had more than doubled. However, as a fan of the sweet tofu pudding, the owner of the restaurant lost his faith. It was said that later, he sold the restaurant at a high price and opened his own bar. Thinking of this, Meg felt that his transmigration wasn't without reason. As a fan of the savory tofu pudding, Meg naturally wanted to sell savory tofu pudding. This way, he could first satisfy himself, and then raise the torch of the savory tofu pudding to the world. But will Amy be a fan of the savory or sweet tofu pudding in the future? Meg suddenly realized a very important question. He looked at Amy, who was happily drinking her milk bottle, and frowned as he thought, according to genetics, Amy should eat savory tofu pudding like me, right? She wondered if her mother liked sweet or salty food. The reward for unlocking both sweet and savory tofu pudding flavors, the system replied after a moment of silence. That's good. Meg nodded. He was suddenly a little worried about whether Amy would become a sweetheart. But if Amy became a sweetheart, then what could he do? If she was a sweetheart, then so be it. After all, she was his daughter, so he would forgive the sweetheart as well. Furthermore, his identity had changed from a customer to the owner of the restaurant. Thinking about it from another perspective, if he only sold savory tofu pudding, wouldn't the sweet fans be unhappy? Although there was probably no such thing as tofu pudding in this world, he had gradually become fond of making customers happy. Every time he saw the smiles on customers' faces, he felt a sense of accomplishment. "Okay, I'll sell 1,000 Ruggiamos as soon as possible." Meg nodded. He hesitated for a moment before asking, "But system, I want to eat savory tofu pudding right now. Can we pre-order it this time?" A long string of ellipses floated in Meg's mind. Then came the system's roar, "Host, please take your task seriously. Respect the system." At the same time, there was a burst of static noise. "I can't afford to offend you." If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't cover his ears in his head, Meg would have covered his ears. He didn't expect the system to have such a bad temper. But in fact, he was just casually mentioning it. The most important thing for the restaurant at the moment was to increase its popularity. Ruggiamos that could be cooked quickly and taken out to eat were obviously the best choice. In the next few days, Ruggiamos would be the main dish of the restaurant. Meg looked at the two little ones drinking the goat's milk happily. He got up and went into the kitchen. Looking at the fresh goat's milk on the stove, he suddenly remembered that the unprocessed fresh goat's milk didn't taste very good in his previous life. However, the two little ones were enjoying it so much. Out of curiosity, he also took a small bowl and poured half of it into it to drink. Meg's eyes lit up. The sheep's milk was rich and mellow with a hint of sourness, but that didn't affect the taste at all. On the contrary, it was somewhat appetizing. He gulped down half a bowl of sheep's milk, and his mouth was filled with the taste of milk. This sheep's milk was much better than the processed cow's milk and sheep's milk in his previous life. No wonder the two kids liked it so much. Sure enough, sheep's milk in this world was somewhat different. "It seems that from tomorrow on, I can go buy a bowl of fresh milk every day." Meg closed the lid and put it back in the fridge. Right now, the three of them needed all kinds of nutrients to grow up, and a bowl of fresh sheep's milk every day was quite good. Ugly Duckling's arrival gave Amy a playmate, and she smiled more than usual. But the little thing fell asleep again after being stroked on the head by Amy, and then she carried it back to sleep in the basket with a look of disdain. During lunch, Ugly Duckling was in Amy's arms. It raised its little head and watched Amy put spoonful after spoonful of Yangzhou fried rice into its mouth. It meowed a few times, and it seemed to be very hungry. "Father, can I give Ugly Duckling some rainbow fried rice?" Amy also sensed Ugly Duckling's intention. She looked at Meg and asked, "Not now. You have to wait until it's a little older and has teeth." Meg shook his head. This little kitten had just jumped out of its egg, and it couldn't even eat complimentary food, let alone fried rice. "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling seemed to understand Meg's words. It bared its teeth and meowed at him, revealing a few baby teeth. Meg looked at Ugly Duckling's baby teeth with a little surprise. This otherworldly oviparous cat is indeed extraordinary. It actually has teeth on the first day it hatched. But looking at those little teeth, he still shook his head. It won't work even if it has teeth. You have to wait a few more days. Meow. Ugly Duckling lowered its head dejectedly. It lay in Amy's arms and shrugged as if it were sulking. "It's no use being angry. Anyway, I can't let you eat it. But if you really want to eat it." Amy looked at Ugly Duckling, who slowly raised its head, and put a spoonful of fried rice into its mouth with a smile. "Then you can watch me eat it." Ugly Duckling meowed and burst into tears. It lay on its back in Amy's arms, motionless, with a look of despair on its face. Meg shook his head with a smile. Looking at the two little fellows made him feel better without him knowing. After lunch, Meg cleared the table and went into the kitchen to warm 2 bottles of goat's milk. 1 bottle for each of the 2 little fellows, so that Amy wouldn't be unable to resist snatching Ugly Duckling's food while watching from the side. Chapter 58. Mr. Mac, I heard there's a new dish today. The restaurant was a little busy, but I asked the waiter to come and try it first. A young man with short blonde hair, who had been standing at the door in a daze, looked up with anticipation as soon as Meg opened the door. Yes, but it's only a trial sale today. Meg nodded with a smile. The young man's name was Prolmushin, and he was about 27 or 28 years old. He also owned a shop in the Aden Square, selling a kind of incense that was imported from the distant capital of the Roth Empire. It was very popular with women of all races in Chaos City, and he had 5 employees, so he made a lot of money. He came here yesterday morning because he saw the restaurant's unique decoration. After eating a plate of Yangzhou fried rice, he felt he had found his life again, so he had eaten his lunch and dinner here. In the evening, he even brought 2 owners of the neighboring restaurants here. He didn't come this morning, probably because he heard from his friends that the restaurant was releasing a new dish, so he waited at the door before the lunch service. Give me a plate, then. What's the new dish? Prol asked, looking at Meg curiously as he walked in. It's Laji Rugiamo, Meg answered with a smile. Laji Rugiamo. What's that? Prol frowned. He knew what meat and steamed bread were, but could these 2 things be combined to make a delicious dish? But then he remembered the Yangzhou fried rice. He had asked Meg the meaning of the dish's name, and he had only said Yangzhou was a beautiful place. It seemed like this boss Mag was rather casual in naming his dishes. However, as a genius who could make such delicious food and completely overturn his understanding of food, it was understandable for him to be a little willful. Prol found a random seat and sat down. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded and walked into the kitchen. When he passed by the counter, he saw Amy squatting down and stroking ugly ducklings' back. Cats were addictive, especially cute little ones. Even Amy couldn't help it. Meg had prepared the baiji bread and braised meat in advance. He took a baiji bread from the oven, cut it with a thin knife, and put the chopped meat into it evenly. He poured a spoonful of laji sauce on it, put it in a paper bag, and walked out of the kitchen. Your laji rugiamo, he said with a smile. It smells so good. Prol took the rugiamo. The first thing he was attracted by was the smell of the meat, which was more impactful than the Yangzhou fried rice. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. The craft paper bag was very clean and intricate, and there was an adorable half-elf drawing on it. He recalled that Mag had an adorable half-elf daughter, but he didn't think that Mag would use her back as a trademark. That was a very bold move, and he was indeed an interesting person and a good father. His shop often dealt with different races, so he knew the awkward situation of half-races. As a businessman, Prol treated everyone equally. And Mr. Mac's little girl was really cute. All the customers in the restaurant liked her. But she wasn't here today. Drawing back his thoughts, Prol looked at the delicious food in the bag. It was a whole white bun with a slit in the middle, and the fragrant meat was stuffed into it. So this is the meaning of rugiamo. But is this meat called laji pork? With some doubts, Prol couldn't resist the temptation of the fragrance. He opened his mouth and took a bite, full of expectation. The delicious taste burst out in his mouth almost instantly. The delicious gravy stimulated every taste buds, making him feel unusually satisfied. Different from the mild feeling of the Yangzhou fried rice, this taste was more stimulating, just like the difference between spring water and strong wine. It turned into a hot current, guiding the hot blood in his blood to rush through his veins. Ah! Prol, who had closed his eyes, suddenly opened them. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The blood in his body was surging, just like the first time he confessed to the girl next door. It made him, who was already young, regain his vitality all of a sudden. Immersed in dealing with different races every day, he always kept a smile on his face. He even forgot what a real smile was like. But now, he seemed to have found the feeling of smiling again. This delicious food really made him happy. He couldn't help but want to laugh. One bite after another, Pearl had a happy smile on his face from beginning to end. He had come to Chaos City at the age of 17 and started as a waiter. He had knelt, cried, lost, and won. In the end, he had gained a firm foothold in Chaos City and opened his first shop in Aiden Square. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. The appearance of his hometown had faded away. The past few years of peace and comfort seemed to have made him forget the first time he had come to Chaos City, and the first time he had seen the vast and majestic Aiden Square. The boy had told him that he wanted to own 10 shops in the Aiden Square, and that he wanted to be the best of the best. After finishing a Ruggiamo, Pearl suddenly looked up at Meg and said with a smile, "Mr. Mac, I think I should open a second shop." "Good." Meg nodded with a smile. He didn't know why Pearl suddenly said that, but this Ruggiamo seemed to have given him strength. This change made him feel good. "Please give me another Ruggiamo. I'm sure this kind of blood-boiling food will be popular in Chaos City," Pearl said with certainty, smiling. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded. He went into the kitchen to make another Ruggiamo. After finishing the second Ruggiamo, Pearl took out his purse and looked at Meg. "Mr. Mac, I want to take 5 Ruggiamos back for my friends to try. Is that okay? Today is a trial sale. One person can only order 3 Ruggiamos." Meg shook his head slightly. The trial sale was to attract some attention in advance and lay the foundation for tomorrow's official sale. He didn't make many Ruggiamos. "All right, let's have one more. There's a lad whose father passed away, and he can't lift his spirits. I hope Boss Mag's delicacy can give him some strength to stand up again." Pearl nodded. As a businessman, he could naturally understand Mag. Chapter 59. The 30 Ruggiamos for lunch were soon sold out. Many customers craved the aroma of the meat and asked Meg to make more. Mag couldn't do anything about that. He had prepared so many ingredients, but he could only make Ruggiamo on a first-come, first-served basis. He had to start preparing the Ruggiamo 2 hours in advance, kneading the dough, and making the braised meat. He couldn't make Ruggiamo on the spot like Yangzhou fried rice. The customers were also very interested in the delicate little bag of Ruggiamo. Some even said they wanted to take it back as a purse, especially the cute drawing of the back on the bag. Amy was very happy. More customers came in the evening. The Yangzhou fried rice and Ruggiamo drove them crazy. The unique cooking method and the addictive taste completely subverted their imagination of food. Although the food here was a little expensive, there was no lack of rich people in Chaos City. Spending a few gold coins to satisfy one's appetite was not a difficult thing for them to do. "I'm sorry, but we've sold out today. The official sale will start tomorrow. Because we need to prepare in advance, the number of Ruggiamos for each meal is limited. Please come early tomorrow." Meg saw the last customer out with a smile. He turned over the sign on the door and heaved a sigh of relief. Although he had eaten the Yangzhou fried rice and Ruggiamo, he was still a little tired. The 90 Ruggiamos for the trial sale today were all sold out. Because the Ruggiamo took up some time, the Yangzhou fried rice was sold less than before. He sold only 50 Ruggiamos, and made 360 gold coins in net. Tomorrow, he would get up early and knead more dough to make more Ruggiamos. The 1,000 Ruggiamos were the key to unlock the tofu pudding. Now that he was the owner of a restaurant, he had decided to quit the fight between the two parties. However, he was a little curious. Would there be a salty party and a sweet party in this world? If people got along well with each other, it would be fine. If people drew swords as they did in his previous life, maybe they could set up a ring in front of the restaurant with a sign saying, "Sweet and salty competition." People would fight on the ring every day. With Ugly Duckling in her arms, Amy looked at Meg, interrupting his train of thought. "Father, you must be very tired. Let me massage your shoulders." Meow, meow, Ugly Duckling meowed as if in agreement with Amy's words. Looking at the two adorable little ones, Meg reached out and patted Amy's head. He smiled and shook his head, saying, "It's all right, Daddy isn't tired. Amy, just sit here for a while. If you're tired, you can go upstairs to wash up and sleep." "No, I'm going to sleep with my father today." Amy shook her head before patting Ugly Duckling's head. "Don't you think so, Ugly Duckling?" Meow. Ugly Duckling opened its mouth and yawned. Even though it was nodding, its reluctance was written all over its face. "All right, then I'll speed up." Meg nodded with a smile. He began to clear the plates, wipe the table, and then mop the floor. When he was done, half an hour had already passed. Amy was already half asleep on the counter, and Ugly Duckling had already fallen asleep in her arms. "Put Ugly Duckling in the basket, and then we'll go upstairs to sleep." Meg untied his apron and hung it to the side. He dried his hands and stroked Amy's hair as he spoke in a gentle voice. Amy nodded. Meow, Ugly Duckling seemed to have heard Meg's words, and it looked up at him with a hint of resentment in its eyes. It then grabbed onto Amy's skirt with its little pink paws and shook its head as if it didn't want to get out of her arms. "Ugly Duckling, you can't. Father said you have to sleep downstairs." Amy shook her head and picked it up. As she got off the high stool, she said, "Besides, you're so ugly. What if you scare me when you wake up at night? I might kick you off the bed." Meg couldn't help but chuckle. It seemed that Amy didn't need him to teach her how to be sharp-tongued. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling opened its mouth and tried to act cute to prove that it wasn't that ugly, but Amy still stuffed it into the little basket and wrapped it in a little blanket. Amy stood up and waved her hand as she said, "Ugly Duckling, you have to sleep well. If you do well, I'll take you out to play tomorrow morning." She then held on to Meg's hand and prepared to go upstairs. Meow, 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 meow. Ugly Duckling immediately squirmed out of the little blanket and put its hands on the edge of the little basket. It looked at Amy's back and cried out pitifully like an abandoned kitten. "Father, Ugly Duckling seems to be very scared. Can we take it upstairs? I'll try my best not to kick it off the bed." Amy stopped in her tracks and looked back at the aggrieved Ugly Duckling, which was on the verge of tears, before looking up at Meg. Meg looked at the pitiful Ugly Duckling, then at the expectant Amy. The two of them acting cute together was a double blow, and there was no way he could resist. What could he do? He could only nod, and say, "All right, then let's take it upstairs." "All right." A joyful smile appeared on Amy's face, but her smile faded as she turned around. She crouched down with a resigned expression and picked up Ugly Duckling from the basket. She sighed, and said, "I really don't know what to do with you, but you have to cover your face when you sleep tonight. Don't scare me." Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling cried out happily before finding a comfortable position in Amy's arms. It rubbed its little head against her and closed its eyes with satisfaction. After going upstairs, Amy placed the sleeping Ugly Duckling on the edge of the little bed, and carefully placed its little head on the pillow before following Meg to wash up. Meg helped Amy take a bath, and then bought a cute bluish-purple nightgown from the system. He dried her hair before carrying her to the little bed. As soon as Amy lay down, Ugly Duckling reached out its little paws to hug her arm, and its little head also pressed against her. "You're so heavy." Amy didn't give it any face as she pushed it aside. She yawned, and looked at Meg as she whispered, "Good night, Father, good night." Meg smiled as he stroked Amy's hair. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. Ugly Duckling, which had been pushed aside, came over in a daze again. It still wanted to hug her arm and sleep with its little face pressed against her. What a clingy little thing. Meg shook his head with a smile. He tucked the two little ones in, turned off the lights, and tiptoed out of the room to take a bath. Chapter 60. Yongjo fried rice was delicious, and so was Rujiamo. However, as a person who ate rice and side dishes as his staple food, eating them every day felt like something was missing. Although the system had just given him a new mission, and he could unlock the tofu pudding, Meg still wanted to trick the system and see if he could unlock one or two other dishes. The system was silent for a while, and then said, "Since the host underestimated the system's mission, a hidden mission has been triggered. When 1,000 customers enter the restaurant, a recipe for braised chicken and rice will be unlocked. Each customer will only be counted once. If the mission is not accomplished in 15 days, your strength will be reduced by 0.5. Does this mean that 1,000 customers will enter the restaurant in 15 days? Meg raised his eyebrows. This task was much more difficult than selling 1,000 rujiamos. After all, some customers could eat several rujiamos, and repeat customers would spend more than once. One person could buy a dozen rujiamos in a few days. However, having 1,000 different customers was a completely different concept. If it could be achieved, the restaurant would definitely be filled to the brim. However, only 155 customers had entered the restaurant in the past few days. If he couldn't accomplish this mission, his strength would be deducted. This was a bit troublesome. Of course, Meg wasn't worried about business. He was worried that the previous customers would stick around, and the new customers might not be able to eat it. This would definitely slow down the growth of new customers. The key is to spend money in the restaurant. It seems that I have to control the number of takeouts. It's best if I can achieve a certain publicity effect and satisfy the customer's requirements, Meg thought to himself. His eyes lit up when he thought of braised chicken and rice. This was one of the 3 food and beverage giants, comparable to Lanzhou ramen and Shaoxian snacks. Meg had eaten authentic braised chicken and rice in several restaurants in his previous life. Although he would be merciless after wiping his mouth, the taste was really good. The meat was fresh and tender, and the soup was pure and delicious. After eating the chicken, he ordered a bowl of rice and poured it into the soup pot. It was delicious chicken soup mixed with rice. Now that he thought about it, he was really picky. However, when he thought about his vicious comments, Meg's face became a little twisted. Damn it. Even if I get the recipe after completing the mission, I have to be mentally prepared to be locked up in the test field for the god of cookery for hundreds of days. The reincarnation of the heavenly Tao was truly retribution. Meg ridiculed the heavenly Tao for making such a standard dish in his heart and fell asleep in a short while. The next morning, Meg was awakened by Amy's voice. He turned on the bedside lamp and sat up to look at the little bed. Amy was sitting on the bed, and it appeared that she had also just woken up. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around before turning to Meg with a perplexed expression. "Father, where's Ugly Duckling?" Meg was taken aback. Didn't Ugly Duckling sleep on Amy's arm yesterday? Meow. At this moment, a pitiful voice came from under the bed. Amy and Meg looked under the bed at the same time. Ugly Duckling had fallen under the bed at some point, and it was looking up at Amy with an aggrieved expression, as if it were a little wife who had been kicked off the bed. Pfft. Amy immediately burst into laughter. She lay down on the edge of the bed, and said with a smile, "Ugly Duckling, don't tell me I kicked you off the bed." Ugly Duckling seemed to have understood Amy's words, and it nodded with an aggrieved expression. It raised its little paws as if it were asking for a hug. A smile also appeared on Meg's face. He looked at Ugly Duckling on the ground and found it to be quite pitiful. Right? I told you I might kick you off the bed, but you didn't believe me. Next time, you'd better sleep in your little basket. Amy shrugged. Then, she turned to Meg and asked, Father, are you going to get up now? She yawned as she spoke. It's still very early. Amy and Ugly Duckling can sleep for a while longer. I'll get up to prepare the ingredients. Meg glanced at the alarm clock at the head of the bed. It was only 4:50 a.m. He got up from the bed and picked up the soft, palm-sized Ugly Duckling from the bottom of the bed. He placed it on the little bed and shook his head with a smile. All right, Amy can sleep for a while longer. Amy nodded. She pressed down on Ugly Duckling's head as it tried to crawl into her arms. Ugly Duckling, don't scratch my clothes. Father bought them for me. If you ruin them, I won't allow you to sleep with me in the future, she warned seriously. Meow, Ugly Duckling didn't dare to move anymore. It nodded, and lay down on the blanket with its eyes closed. Good boy. Amy nodded with satisfaction. She lay down again, and also closed her eyes, and fell asleep again. Meg tucked Amy in with a smile. Then, he folded a small corner of the blanket and put it on Ugly Duckling. It was important to keep the kitten warm. Meg changed his clothes and washed up. Then, he went downstairs to prepare the ingredients for the Ruggiamo. He planned to make 64 Ruggiamos this morning. After the 4 ovens were sold out, the 1.5-hour opening time in the morning was almost over. At 7 a.m., Meg went upstairs to wake Amy up. The little girl insisted on brushing Ugly Duckling's teeth when she was washing up. Meg explained to her for a long while before she gave up. But in the end, she still threatened Ugly Duckling into rinsing its mouth a few times. Forget it now. You can brush it when your teeth are bigger. Amy nodded as she looked at Ugly Duckling, which licked the water and swallowed it directly. Ugly Duckling stared at the little toothbrush and white foam in Amy's mouth and slowly backed toward the door. This thing is too scary. I have to retreat. I've already finished the goat's milk I bought yesterday. I won't have time to buy more until the morning opening time is over. So, at breakfast time, Ugly Duckling, lying in Amy's arms, looked up at Meg and Amy eating Ruggiamo and Yangzhou fried rice at the same time. Its eyes were almost shining, but no one wanted to feed it. In the end, it raised its paw sadly to cover its eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. Amy took a bite of the Ruggiamo, lowered her head, and said with a smile, Ugly Duckling, I see your eyes coming out of your paw. You can look if you want. I won't feed you anyway. Ugly Duckling slowly turned its face away, moved its paw, and looked up at the sky with a look of despair. Meg shook his head with a smile. After breakfast, he cleared the table. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, he opened the door of the restaurant. Chapter 61. Meg was a little surprised. It seemed that yesterday's Ruggiamo had brought people to line up early in the morning. He nodded with a smile as a response, turned over the sign, and stepped aside to let them in. Mr. Mack, it seems that I'll have to line up earlier in the future. Maybe the line will stretch to the other end of Aiden Square. Mabai came in first and said with a smile, I'll have 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice. Ruggiamo is better for young people like them. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded. Mr. Mack, I'd like a new dish. What's it called? The small-eyed man who followed Mabai sat down at a nearby table and said to Meg. The new dish is Laji Ruggiamo. It's already on the menu. Meg replied with a smile. In the morning, the system had automatically written the price of Laji Ruggiamo on the menu, which saved a lot of effort for Meg. And on the back of the menu, Meg had also asked the system to write down 2 rules in golden letters. 1. No shouting in the restaurant. 2. All transactions in the restaurant are cash. No credit. As for the rest of the rules, he would add them later. After all, he didn't know what kind of situation he would run into when he opened a restaurant in another world. It wouldn't be too late to add them when he ran into them. Meg's basic requirement for the restaurant was to provide a comfortable dining environment for the customers. It would be disgusting to be disturbed by someone talking loudly during a meal. Cash transactions were to avoid some melodramatic events such as debt collection. After all, he opened the restaurant to make money and to give himself and a better life, not to open a charity hall. Except for dolls like Miss Luna, who could make him feel grateful, he had to pay for the rest of the food. The cost of ingredients was not low, and Meg, who was in a hurry to save money, couldn't pay for it himself. I'll also have a la Giorgiamo, no, too. I'm craving it after watching them eat it last night, a fat man said as he pulled out a chair and sat down. Many people opened the menu and looked at it. La Giorgiamo at 300 copper coins per serving was half the price of Yangzhou fried rice. Most of them ordered a serving first. After Meg recorded the number of servings, he turned around and went into the kitchen. The baiji bread was already roasting in the oven, and the la Giorgiamo was ready. All they needed to do was to put the meat into the baiji bread, and a la Giorgiamo would be ready. Good morning, Dwarf Mobai Grandpa. Amy sat down on a high stool with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and greeted Mobai. She also greeted some of the customers that she had met in the past 2 days, but most of them used some strange nicknames. For example, the man with small eyes was called Uncle Squinty Eyes, and the fat man over there was called Uncle Big Squinty Eyes, because his eyes were squeezed into slits by his fat, but he looked bigger, so she added a prefix to distinguish him. The customers had no choice but to accept Amy's unique way of giving nicknames with smiles. After all, Mr. Mac's food was so delicious, and the little girl was so cute, so they couldn't get angry in front of the delicious food and the cute little girl. Good morning, little boss. Mobai nodded with a smile. Looking at Ugly Duckling, which stuck its little head out of Amy's arms, he asked curiously, "What's that in your arms, little boss?" "A cat." Everyone who was waiting for the dishes to be served also looked curiously at the little thing in Amy's arms. It was furry and looked a bit like a cat. Its orange and white fur looked very cute, but they usually saw cats with pure colors. Most of them were white or black. They had never seen a cat with such a strange color. Ugly Duckling was also appraising everyone in the restaurant with its sapphire-like eyes. It had been sleeping for almost the entire day yesterday, so this was the first time it had seen so many people. Seeing that everyone was staring at it, it instinctively bared its teeth and meowed a couple of times. "No, it's Ugly Duckling." Amy shook her head and patted Ugly Duckling's head. "Ugly Duckling, don't meow. Don't disturb the customers." Meow. Ugly Duckling immediately became quiet. It found a comfortable position again and curled up in Amy's arms. It yawned lazily and glanced at the customers from the corner of its eyes. It couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them anymore, so it closed its eyes and went back to sleep. Everyone felt that they were being looked down upon by a cat, and their expressions were a little strange. They couldn't even get angry at a little girl, let alone a little cat. Ugly Duckling. The customers were a little confused by Amy's words. They really couldn't see how this cute kitten was ugly and looked like a duck. However, when they thought of Amy's casual way of giving nicknames and her sharp tongue, they understood a little. Ugly Duckling is just Ugly Duckling. This is probably its fate to have a master like Amy. Under everyone's expectant gazes, Meg took out the la Giorgiamo they had asked for. It was faster to make, and then he went into the kitchen to cook the Yangzhou fried rice. Mobai didn't have any objections. Although he had arrived early, it didn't matter if he had to wait a little longer for the delicious food. Smelling the aroma of the rujiamo, the small-eyed man opened his mouth and took a bite, savoring the savory taste in his mouth. After swallowing, something seemed to rush out of his bloodline. He couldn't help but close his eyes and let out a long sigh of admiration with a happy smile on his face. "Is that all you've got?" Fatty Harrison looked at the small-eyed man with disdain. Although he was also looking forward to the rujiamo, he certainly wouldn't be as exaggerated as the small-eyed man. He opened his mouth and took a big bite, but his eyes suddenly widened. The soft cured meat was bitten open, and the sauce overflowed, blending with the soft and sweet bai bread. The delicious taste made all the fat on his body tremble, as if it were cheering and jumping for joy. The fact that he could eat so much meant that he was very passionate about food. His family ran 3 banks, so money was never a concern for him. When he was in the capital of the Roth Empire, he had eaten a big meal that cost hundreds of gold coins, made with all kinds of precious ingredients. He had thought that was the best thing in the world. But compared with this rujiamo, those things were simply unpalatable. How could those spices and spices compare to such a fragrant gravy? Even the white steamed bun outside the rujiamo was so fragrant and sweet. What was even more miraculous was that after swallowing it, it felt as if he had swallowed a mouthful of hard liquor. However, there was no throat-cutting sensation like hard liquor. His blood began to boil, as if he had suddenly become violent. The fat on his body felt as if it was being burned, trembling slightly, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Chapter 62. Mr. Mac, your rujiamo is not only delicious, but it can also help me lose weight. Harrison was excited not only because of the delicious food, but also because he could feel the fat on his body vibrating slightly with the flow of his blood after eating the rujiamo, as if it were burning. It was even more intense than when his father forced him to practice swordsmanship. What did this mean? If eating such delicious food could help me lose weight, then it would be a blessing for fat people. Eating delicious food and feeling the weight loss at the same time was the dream of many foodies, but no one had ever heard of such food. However, such delicious food seemed to have appeared, and he had just eaten one. The feeling of his blood surging and his fat burning was so strong and clear. Although it was impossible to become thin in one bite, eating one rujiamo was about the same as practicing swordsmanship for half an hour. If he ate a few rujiamos every day, he would never have to practice swordsmanship again, and he could watch himself losing weight. Thinking of this, Harrison became even more excited. Although he didn't feel inferior about being fat, it was a good thing to have a chance to lose some weight. After all, he felt a little out of breath after walking a few steps, which was uncomfortable. Besides, he had a few brothers who were in the same situation as him. They usually went out to eat and drink with each other, and they were all about the same size as him. He had planned to take them to try Mr. Mac's cooking in a few days and show them what real food was. Now that they had tasted the magical effect of the rujiamo, it seemed that he should take them to try it as soon as possible. Only a genius like Meg could make such delicious food that could help them lose weight. Meg looked at Harrison, who was sweating and whose fat was trembling slightly, and accepted his praise with a smile. He was a little surprised. It seemed that fat people would have a stronger reaction after eating rujiamo. The fat was trembling at an amazing frequency. If it could really help them lose weight, it would be amazing. Maybe this point alone could make the sales of rujiamo soar. But although the pork in the rujiamo had a violent factor, the system said that it only affected the blood. Why did it affect the fat now? Meg was a little confused. When one is overly obese, their blood vessels will be squeezed by the fat. Therefore, when the blood accelerates, it will produce a certain amount of exercise on the fat in the blood vessels and the fat around the blood vessels. Therefore, it will have a certain fat reduction effect. However, this effect will only be maintained until the blood flows normally in the blood vessels. Therefore, it will not have much effect on people who are moderately obese or below. The main effect of this Ruggiamo is to strengthen the blood vessels, not to lose weight, the system explained to Meg. Meg finally understood. No wonder he and Amy did not have the same reaction as Harrison did after eating it. But this effect was really good news for moderately obese people. Even if they couldn't become thin by eating Ruggiamo, they could at least eat until they were healthy again. After hearing the system's explanation, Meg looked at Harrison and said, the weight loss effect might only allow your body to return to normal. If you want to lose weight, I'm afraid you'll have to control your diet and exercise. Although using weight loss as a gimmick would certainly promote the Ruggiamo quickly, if the effect did not meet expectations, there might be some extra trouble. The Ruggiamo was worth the price just because of its delicious taste. The extra effect was a bonus. Meg was confident that the Ruggiamo was irreplaceable. Even if there were imitators on the market, he would not have to worry about the business being stolen. I see. Harrison nodded. He glanced at the skinny man with small eyes beside him. His face had become ruddy and energetic, but nothing had happened to him. But on second thought, he nodded with a smile and said, it would be great if I could return to normal. I'm out of breath now, and it's hard for me to do anything. I'll call my friends over tomorrow. They'll definitely love this Ruggiamo. Boss, can I have 2 more? Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded with a smile. Of course, he welcomed such behavior. The number of Ruggiamos sold was very important, and so was the number of customers. 1,000 customers was not a small number. The other customers didn't wait any longer. They all took a bite of the Ruggiamo in their hands. Feeling the delicious taste in their mouths, they all smiled happily and couldn't help exclaiming in a strange way. The impact of the delicious taste was too strong. Boss, please give me another one. Me too. After only 1 bite, many people had already started ordering again. I knew it. Father's food is the best. Amy murmured softly, stroking Ugly Duckling's fur. Looking at the happy faces of the customers, she also smiled happily. Is this a restaurant? Outside Amy's, the tall Sargeras looked at the restaurant with a slight frown. He had traveled to many places on the continent, and had only come to Chaos City a few days ago. He couldn't remember how many times he had been here, but he didn't expect to see a restaurant in this corner of the Aiden Square. Judging from the decoration, it seemed to be run by a human. He took 2 steps forward and looked at the transparent crystal. It was so clear and transparent. He wanted to reach out his hands that were covered with lava patterns to touch it, but he quickly stopped. This kind of crystal would probably shatter with a touch, and it would definitely be very expensive. He didn't have that much money in his pocket right now to compensate for it. He didn't have many gold coins with him. He planned to go to the Adventurers Guild to take some more difficult missions with better rewards. He would continue his journey after making enough money. With his strength, the missions that were difficult for ordinary human adventurers were not too difficult to complete. However, the rewards were extraordinarily generous. Staying here for half a month would allow him to earn enough for the travel expenses for the next half a year. He could then continue on his journey to find a way to break through. Look at these guys. They seem to have something delicious. Sargeras looked into the restaurant through the glass window. The humans and dwarves inside were holding small bags in their hands. He didn't know what they were eating, but they looked very happy. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded, and said, "Let's go in and have a look." The food made by humans is indeed the best on the continent. Let's go to the guild after breakfast. He pushed the door open and went in. Ding! The bell rang. Meg, who had just placed a plate of Yangzhou fried rice in front of Mobai, looked up at the door. He was a little surprised when he saw the person who pushed the door open. Chapter 63. As soon as Sargeras opened the door, the rich aroma of meat wafted out, making his eyes light up. It was different from the aroma of roasted meat and boiled meat. The aroma of this meat was richer and more enticing. He didn't know what kind of spices and cooking methods were used to make the meat give off such an enticing aroma. He couldn't help but swallow. He didn't care much about the restaurant's decorations. He was a little disgusted by the gaudy ones, so this restaurant was quite simple. However, he was stunned when his gaze fell on the wall of the Ghost Islands. This was the first time he saw a painting of the Demon Islands in a human restaurant. There were also paintings of the capital of the Roth Empire and the Wind Forest of the Elves. He looked at Meg, who was wearing simple black and white clothes. It seemed that the owner of this restaurant was a man who had seen the world. But will the owner serve me? Sargeras couldn't help but stop. Meg was also looking at Sargeras. He had seen some demons when he went out these days. There were all kinds of demons, and there were all kinds of strange ones. Some had grass growing on their heads, some had fire on their heads. Anyway, demons looked the most abnormal. Of course, succubi were an exception. When he went out to buy goat's milk yesterday, he saw a succubus with a pretty face and a pretty voice. She was very domineering when bargaining with the owner. In just a few words, she had reduced the original price of 15 copper coins to 5 copper coins for a bag of cucumbers. She even gave him a handful of green onions. Sargeras was very impressed. However, this was the first demon to eat in the restaurant. This demon was very tall, even a head taller than the Habang brothers. His appearance was similar to that of a human. His eyes were dark red, and on his big bald head, dark red lava patterns spread from the top of his head down to his face, neck, and hands. They were like tattoos, and looked a little scary. He was wearing an old black warrior's suit, and the bottom of his cowhide boots were half worn out. It seemed that he had traveled a long way with him. What was even more eye-catching was the bright red cloak tied around his shoulders. The bright red color made the cloak look like it was on fire. Humans who had lived in Chaos City for a long time didn't have a strong fear of demons. After all, they could see all kinds of races every day when they went out, so it was normal to have a few demons as neighbors. However, most humans didn't like eating together with demons and forest trolls, which were too oppressive. They didn't even dare to speak loudly, so they ate in a more restrained manner. Therefore, many restaurants opened by humans would deliberately separate humans, demons, and forest trolls to eat in separate areas, or directly right at the entrance of the restaurant that customers of these two races were not welcome. The restaurants opened by the elves would separate out the most comfortable seats in the restaurant for elven guests, while rejecting dwarves, demons, and forest trolls. All the customers in the restaurant looked at Meg. Apart from Mobai, all the customers in the restaurant were humans, and there didn't seem to be a section specially set up for demons, so they were all curious about what Meg would do. Of course, to them, the ideal thing was naturally not to receive him. Meg was also a human, so the possibility of him doing that was higher. Chase this demon away. Meg naturally saw through their thoughts from their eyes. But how could that be possible? He was still thinking about the day when he could get some treasures from the giant dragon. This demon was just the beginning. Everyone who entered the restaurant was a customer, so he naturally had to treat them equally. He wouldn't do racial discrimination. Host, the system suggests that in order to enhance the dining experience of the customers, it's a good choice to reject some customers from entering the restaurant. Or you can divide the restaurant into sections, and separate the dangerous races from the weak races. Each of them can eat in a designated area to avoid conflict. At this moment, the system's voice sounded with a hint of sincerity. System, can the number of 1,000 customers in the restaurant be halved? Meg asked calmly. The mission has been issued and cannot be changed. Host, please be more respectful of the mission issued by the system. Otherwise, the hidden mission may be triggered again. The system said solemnly. Then you want me to reject half of the customers out of the restaurant? Do you think I'm stupid? Meg pursed his lips. A line of ellipses floated by the system. Also, will you expand the restaurant for me? Meg continued to ask. The system's renovation of the restaurant is limited to the land provided by the host. Now that the renovation has been completed, there is no expansion authority in the short term. The system replied. Then you want me to divide the restaurant into sections for such a small restaurant? If one section for each race, there will be a total of 16 tables. You want me to divide 2 tables for each race, and then put the elves, demons, and humans on top of them? System, is this how your god of cookery operates his restaurant? Meg's words carried a hint of sarcasm. The system fell silent and didn't say anything else. Seeing that the system didn't say anything else, Meg didn't say anything else. He didn't want to divide the restaurant into sections, and he didn't want to prohibit other races from entering. In fact, the most important thing was that he had a blueprint in mind to eliminate racial discrimination. Amy was currently discriminated against because of her half-elf status, and that was something he couldn't tolerate. Parading on the streets wouldn't work in this world, so it was a good idea to start with the customers of the restaurant. Thus, he looked at the lava demon with a smile, and said, "Welcome, please take a seat." The customers in the restaurant looked at Meg with surprise. They had thought that he would refuse to let the demon eat. After all, most of the customers in the restaurant these days were humans. However, not only did Meg not refuse, but it seemed that he wasn't even going to divide the area for the demon. Instead, he was going to let the demon sit wherever he wanted. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to sit next to the demon, or even sit at the same table as the demon? Thinking of this, many customers became nervous. In Chaos City, the behavior of all races was restricted by the Grey Temple, and even ordinary humans could live peacefully here. However, even if humans lived together, there would be all kinds of conflicts, not to mention in Chaos City. Humans were generally the weaker party, so it was not uncommon for humans to be killed by demons, trolls, or orcs. Naturally, they would still have some grudges against each other. However, looking at the fragrant Rugiamos in their hands, and then looking at Sargeras, they hesitated for a moment, and finally chose to continue eating Rugiamos. Who cares? With such delicious Rugiamos to eat, even if they had to sit at the same table as a giant dragon, they would accept it. Let's talk about the time of the update. Chapter 64. Sargeras nodded. He was also a little surprised. Over the years, many human restaurants had refused to let him eat there. Even if he was allowed to stay, he would have to eat in a section reserved for demons, which made him feel awkward as if he was an alien. To his surprise, this skinny human owner didn't seem to be afraid of him at all, and even let him sit wherever he wanted. This made him feel respected for the first time. He looked around, and then pulled out a chair and sat down at a table in the corner by the door. There weren't any customers around yet. The tempting aroma of meat made Sargeras hungrier. He looked at Meg, pointed to a Rugiamo in a customer's hand, and said, "Boss, I'd like one of those." His voice was a little hoarse and dry, as if he hadn't drunk water for a long time. "Okay." Meg nodded, and then turned to the kitchen. "Wow, what a big bald head." Amy's eyes lit up when she saw Sargeras sit down. She slipped down from the bar stool with the little orange cat in her arms and walked to the table. She looked up at him curiously and asked, "Hello, big bald head. I'm Amy. Are you a demon? What kind of demon are you? You don't even have a strand of hair. Are you a bald demon? Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was lying in Amy's arms, also looked up at Sargeras curiously. It was also not afraid at all. This was the first time Sargeras had been called a big baldy to his face. As a lava troll, his temper had always been as explosive as lava. No one had dared to look down on him when he was on the Demon Islands. In Chaos City, even normal humans would avoid him when they saw him. He didn't expect this little girl to call him that. However, when he looked at Amy, the anger in his eyes faded away. This little girl is so cute. Her silver hair was braided in 2 little braids. Her face was delicate and cute, and she had a pair of small pointed ears. She looked like a half-elf. She was also holding a furry orange and white beast in her arms. Now that she was standing in front of the table, the 2 little fellows raised their heads and stared at him with their big blue eyes full of curiosity and expectation. Looking at their expressions, there wasn't the slightest bit of mockery or ridicule in their words. It should be more out of childlike curiosity. If he had met such naughty kids in the past, Sargeras would have taken out a fireball to scare them away. But this little girl was so cute that he didn't want to scare her with a fireball. Besides, she was the daughter of the owner of this restaurant. The owner had shown him respect just now, so he didn't ask such a question. But he still looked at Amy with a straight face and said, "I'm Sargeras, a powerful lava demon warrior, not a bald demon." Saw. Baldy. Amy shrugged helplessly. But your name is so hard to pronounce. Big Bald is so easy to remember. I remember it as soon as I see you. Sargeras's eyes lit up again. If the person standing in front of him had been a man, he would have definitely challenged him to a duel. No, he would have directly cast a bursting flame spell on him to let him know the consequences of disrespecting a lava demon. But looking at Amy, who looked so conflicted and helpless, he couldn't get angry. How could he do that to such a little girl? As a demon, Sargeras was rarely soft-hearted and compassionate. Over the years, there were many humans who had died in his hands for various reasons. But now, there was a fire in his heart, and he had nowhere to vent it. After all, the little girl had tried her best. It even made him wonder if his name was really too hard to remember. Your la ji Ruggiamo. Meg came out with a Ruggiamo and handed it to Sargeras. He patted Amy's head with a smile. He had heard most of their conversation. This little girl is so lovable and annoying. However, as a person with a hidden poisonous tongue, there was an inexplicable sense of satisfaction when he saw Amy make the customers angry and annoyed, but they could only choose to forgive her after seeing her face. It was quite refreshing. Sargeras took the Ruggiamo and turned his attention from Amy to the Ruggiamo in his hand. The steaming Ruggiamo gave off an enticing aroma, and the chopped meat was stuffed into the white biscuit that had been cut open. He had been to many places on the continent, even the capital of the Roth Empire. But this was the first time he had seen a biscuit made like this. He couldn't help but take a big bite. An unprecedented delicacy spread in his mouth, and he couldn't help but close his eyes. Every taste bud was cheering and jumping. This kind of delicacy was so special. It was completely different from the meat he had eaten in the past. After it was combined with the soft and sweet biscuit, the taste was raised to another level. It was really delicious and moved him. He wasn't a picky eater. When he was on Demon Island, he often ate raw meat. At most, he would put it in his hand and roast it. Later, he left Demon Island to find a way to become stronger. After that, he slowly started to come into contact with human food. After cooking, the texture and taste were indeed much better. But this was the first time he had eaten something as delicious as this. It was like a small torch suddenly turning into lava. It was a completely different level of taste. Meg pulled Amy back a few steps. This pork was from Demon Island. According to the system, it should have a strong effect on demons, so they had to be careful of his reaction. After Sargeras swallowed the big mouthful of Ruggiamo, it immediately turned into a stream of heat that slid down his throat. His throat suddenly felt like it was on fire, and the feeling quickly spread to his blood. His blood seemed to be boiling, like a galloping horse, crashing and slapping against each other. Flames appeared one after another, like flowers blooming on top of his blood. Whoosh! Ah! The sound of rising flames rang out. Sargeras threw his head back and let out a long howl. His closed eyes suddenly opened, and flames more than 10 centimeters long rose up from all over his body. Then the front of his clothes burst open, and the fine lines of lava on his body split open at a speed visible to the naked eye. Golden red liquid flowed slowly inside, giving off a terrifying heat like real lava. Chapter 65. Sargeras's clothes were torn off, and his body was on fire. The red lava flowing and the lava patterns raised the temperature of the restaurant. Meg was surprised to see Sargeras's reaction. If it were another succubus who ate the Ruggiamo, he couldn't imagine what would happen next. He thought he might have to put some reminders on the menu. Luckily, Sargeras's clothes were made of a special material. Although he was on fire, his clothes and cloak were not affected at all. Therefore, the embarrassing scene of his clothes being burned off didn't happen. Mag wasn't the only one who was stunned. The two customers who had just walked in were also shocked. Although the rich aroma of meat wafting toward them made them swallow involuntarily, they still chose to close the door and retreat out of the restaurant when they saw that the lava demon seemed to have entered a state of rage. What did Mr. Mac do to that lava demon? Why did he put him into battle mode? The two customers walked a few steps away. Thinking of the tempting aroma, they didn't want to leave. They couldn't help feeling worried and surprised. Lava demons were one of the most powerful demons in terms of fighting ability. They were also very destructive. A few fireballs from them could burn down a house. Mag, who had always been gentle and friendly, had somehow provoked that lava troll. If this big fellow flew into a rage, it might even raise the entire restaurant to the ground. If the owner of the restaurant was powerful or had a powerful force behind him, he wouldn't have to worry about people causing trouble. However, there was only Meg and Amy in Mamie's family. They were not at the same level as that demon in battle mode. They couldn't help but worry about whether they would be able to eat something as delicious as Yangzhou fried rice in the future. They had come early today to try the new dish. The customers in the restaurant saw Sargeras's reaction after eating the Ruggiamo. They also felt their blood boiling after eating the Ruggiamo, but it wasn't too bad. It was quite comfortable. However, he didn't expect the demon to have such a big reaction. It actually revealed its combat form. He didn't know what Mr. Mac had put in the Ruggiamo. Sargeras took 2 steps back to avoid burning the table. The blood in his body and the magma on the surface of his body were circulating faster. The chains that had not been broken for a long time seemed to have loosened a little. This feeling made his heart beat faster. Ever since he could no longer advance his strength more than 50 years ago, he had tried countless methods and almost traveled across half of the continent, but he still couldn't find a way to break through. He didn't expect that after just one bite of the Ruggiamo, he would feel like he could make a breakthrough. It was as if a spark had been ignited. He felt that as long as he continued to eat, those sparks would slowly burn into a big fire, allowing him to be reborn from the ashes and break through this layer of shackles, becoming the first lava demon to break through the shackles in 100 years. At that time, the plan that he had conceived 50 years ago could be carried out. The thing under the holy lake could also reappear in the world. This made his expression somewhat excited. "Father, our chair was burned." While everyone was holding their breaths and looking at Sargeras to see if there would be other changes in his body, Amy pointed to a pile of black ashes on the ground with her little finger. Then she looked up at Sargeras with a serious expression on her face. "Pay for it, big bald guy. Although you're a demon, I'm super fierce. I'll set you on fire." Meow. Ugly duckling in Amy's arms also bristled. It meowed at Sargeras, but its voice sounded a little soft and cute. Sargeras, who was still immersed in the joy of loosening his shackles, was a little surprised. He looked down at the burnt chair and touched his big bald head awkwardly. However, he was in a good mood now, so he naturally didn't care about the compensation of a chair. He controlled the flames on his body, and the temperature dropped a lot. However, the cracks on his body didn't disappear, and the golden-red magma could still be seen flowing slowly in them. He waved his hand and said, "I'll pay for it. But boss, give me 10 more Ruggiamos." "Okay, that's what you said." Amy nodded with a hint of warning in her eyes. "Little owner, the bill, please." At this time, the small-eyed man put down the bag of Ruggiamo in his hand and stood up contentedly. He took out his money bag and said to Amy, "Ruggiamo in the morning makes me feel refreshed and energetic. It's so comfortable." 1 Ruggiamo, 3 gold coins. Amy nodded. 3 gold coins. The small-eyed man counted out 3 gold coins from his money bag and put them in Amy's hand. Then he said goodbye to Meg, walked a little farther away from Sargeras, opened the door, and walked out of the restaurant. 3. "Boss, you're selling the bread for 3 gold coins. How much do I have to pay for the chair?" Sargeras stared at Meg and unconsciously reached out to touch his money bag. 3 gold coins for a bread that could loosen his shackles wasn't expensive at all in his eyes. However, he only had a dozen gold coins left in his money bag. If he added the compensation for the chair, he definitely couldn't afford 10 gold coins. The other customers in the restaurant also looked over, curious about the compensation for the chair. The style of the restaurant was very comfortable. The tables and chairs were simple, but not inferior. Instead, they had a simple style. "Yes, 3 gold coins for 1 Lagi Ruggiamo." Meg nodded with a smile. He also glanced at the ashes on the ground, and asked in his mind, "System, how much is 1 chair?" "1 matching chair in the restaurant, 10 gold coins," the system answered slowly, 10 gold coins. "Do you think I'm a sucker?" Meg pursed his lips. The style of the chairs in the restaurant was simple and elegant, but 10 gold coins was a bit high. All the tables and chairs in the restaurant are made from the same centuries-old tree in the depths of the wind forest. The tree rings and patterns are exactly the same, so the visual effect is very harmonious and comfortable. Now there are only 5 matching chairs left. "If you want to buy them, please do so now," the system answered calmly. "You're using the holy spring of elves to grow rice, and a centuries-old tree to make tables and chairs. Aren't you afraid that the elves will come to kill me one day?" Meg was a little speechless. But he had to admit that the system had put in a lot of effort to improve the style of the restaurant. Using a big tree in the wind forest as a table, this should be the only restaurant in Chaos City. All the operations of the system are within the safe range. There is no danger of being discovered. "Please don't underestimate the system," the system said angrily. "This chair is 10 gold coins," Meg said to Sargeras with a smile, ignoring the system. 3 gold coins. Sargeras looked down at the gold coins in his big hand. Chapter 66. Meg glanced at the gold coins in Sargeras's hand. There were exactly 13 gold coins. Sargeras had just asked for 10 Ruggiamos. It seemed that he didn't bring enough money today. He wanted to laugh. The customers waiting outside the door saw that the chaos they had expected didn't happen, and that a man with small eyes walked out of the restaurant with a satisfied face. It seemed that there was no problem in the restaurant. They hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. "Boss, I don't think it's very kind of you to charge me 10 gold coins for a wooden chair like this. Even if I go out to buy one, it won't cost me more than 2 gold coins. How about this? I'll charge you 4 gold coins, and I'll buy 2 Ruggiamos with the remaining 6 gold coins." Sargeras raised his voice and stared at Mag with his red eyes. He had always been too lazy to control his emotions when dealing with men. He was only talking to Meg for the sake of the Ruggiamos. Otherwise, he would be holding a big fireball in his hand right now. The 2 men who had just entered the restaurant saw the lava troll getting angry, and hurriedly shrank back. However, they were stunned when they heard Sargeras's words. It seemed that this was another demon who had been conquered by Mr. Mac. Haggling with a human in order to eat 2 more Ruggiamos, the demon was not far from losing his dream. Even demons were willing to lower themselves for Ruggiamos. This raised their expectations. They walked a few steps into the restaurant and sat down in an empty seat, waiting for Meg to deal with the matter first. Meg wasn't intimidated by Sargeras's aura at all. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. All the tables and chairs in the restaurant are custom-made. To enhance the visual effect, all the tables and chairs were made from the same big tree. An outsider's chair would spoil the effect, so I can't accept it. A custom-made chair like this costs 10 gold coins." This was a piece of wood obtained from the depths of the wind forest. Even a single piece of wood could be sold for a high price in the capital of the Roth Empire. Now, in order to match the overall style of the restaurant, selling it for 10 gold coins was a very reasonable price. If it weren't for the fact that the system gave him so many precious items, Meg wouldn't have said anything even if he sold it for 100 gold coins. He was just a little worried that the elves would notice that it was a holy tree or something similar. The eyes of the customers in the restaurant lit up when they heard this. They couldn't help but lower their heads to look at the chairs they were sitting on and the tables beside them. They hadn't noticed it before, but now they realized that the tree rings on each of the tables were exactly the same. Even the stripes were the same. No wonder the tables and chairs in the restaurant looked so natural and harmonious at first glance. What was even more astonishing to everyone was that there were a total of 16 tables and 64 chairs in the restaurant, and all of them were made from the same tree. Just how massive was that tree? There was definitely no tree like that around Chaos City. Even if there was such a tree in the depths of the distant mountains, it would definitely cost a lot of money to cut it down or transport it to make tables and chairs of the same style. How could such a huge amount of money be used to make tables and chairs for the customers in the restaurant? They immediately felt that they were being respected and pampered. 3 gold coins for a Lagi Ruggiamo was too expensive. No, it would be a pleasure to eat such a delicious Ruggiamo in such a restaurant, not to mention 3 gold coins, even 6 gold coins would be a pleasure. Many people already had this feeling in their hearts. They looked at the other decorations in the restaurant. If only the tables and chairs were so exquisite, the other decorations must be even more exquisite. However, on second thought, they couldn't help but be a little more careful. After all, if anything in the restaurant was broken, they would have to pay a lot of money. Meg's words to Sargeras had inadvertently raised the style and taste of the restaurant in the hearts of the customers. Most of the customers who had the extra money to come here early in the morning to eat a Ruggiamo that cost 3 gold coins had gotten rid of the stage of working hard for a living, and had started to pay attention to the taste of life. I. Sargeras's body burst into flames again. It seemed that he was really angry. He stuffed the remaining half of the Ruggiamo into his mouth and swallowed it, and the flames on his body burned even brighter. However, he had learned his lesson this time. He knew that he should stay away from the table and the door. After all, they looked more expensive than the chairs. He stared at Meg and prepared to take out a big fireball to scare Meg. In his eyes, there was no difference between chairs. Meg was talking nonsense. Wasn't he just trying to cheat him of his money? He couldn't accept that. Big bald head, be a good boy and listen to father, or I'll burn you with a fireball. Amy, who was standing in front of Meg, squatted down and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. She looked up at Sargeras, who was covered in flowing lava and flames, and said seriously, "Little girl, step aside. This is between us adults," Sargeras said in a hoarse voice. Sargeras said in a hoarse voice. He looked at Amy, who was standing in front of Mag, and felt a sense of helplessness. Seeing this, the customers all became a little nervous. Compared with Sargeras, who was on fire and had lava grooves on his skin, who looked a little scary, the little Amy and the skinny Meg were completely defenseless. Mulby also turned his head with a frown, but there was not much worry in his eyes. The fireball that Amy casually released the other day scared Hag, and Mr. Mac didn't look like a fool. He definitely wouldn't put himself in danger. Alas, I really don't know what to do with you. Why can't you just be obedient? Amy sighed. She reached out her little hand, and a bluish-purple flame suddenly rose up and slowly condensed into a fist-sized fireball in her hand. She looked at Sargeras seriously and said, "Eat, pay, or I'll burn you all to death." "Are you going to burn me with such a small flame?" Sargeras looked at the small fireball in Amy's hand, and couldn't help but laugh. He looked up at Meg and frowned. "Boss, you're a big man. Do you only know how to hide behind your little girl? My father is very powerful, but it's my job to collect money. So, burn, big bald head," Amy said angrily before Meg could become the god of cookery. She waved her hand, and the bluish-purple fireball in her hand flew toward Sargeras. "Ha!" Sargeras looked at the small fireball that was not much bigger than his thumb. He didn't seem to care at all. He reached out his right hand and casually grabbed it, intending to extinguish it.